Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. The Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and we have back with us again our head coach, Chad Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello, everybody.
It's good to be back with you guys.
It's
been like it's been a month, I guess, since we've been together in the same podcast studio. So,
and we're going to be together
a lot over the next couple of weeks. We'll get into that in a bit.
Chad's an introvert, everyone, so the lot is a lot. Jonathan and I are fine with it.
Episode 220, we had Amber Pierce. It was a blast.
That was a good one.
221, Andy Blow of Precision Hydration. So incredibly informative, and on like a complex topic where there's a whole lot of opinion and conjecture and kind of also like unexplored points of it, like we just don't know quite enough. And
yeah, I really enjoyed that one.
Man, he was good. It was awesome. So if you haven't listened to that one, check it out. Then 222, we had Kelly Starrett from the Ready State on there, which was awesome at Strava. And thank you everybody for being understanding on the audio quality and everything else. So we have lessons learned from that one. We're gonna pack our own setup with us at all times and rely on that so we can control it for all of you. So we've spoiled you with a good experience. So we'll try to continue to make it better. We're going to get straight into things with Daniel's question. Mm-hmm. He says, hey guys, first off, thanks for a great product. In 8 months, my FTP has increased from 4.3 to 4.5 watts per kilogram. Nice. That gets really hard to make those sort of gains.
Yeah, once you start getting up into the mid fours.
Yeah, like 0.1 is a huge thing to celebrate, right?
Yeah.
And he says, and I bounced back from ankle surgery faster than I thought was possible. More importantly, I just finished the Park City point-to-point in 7 hours and 32 minutes. That is really fast, for those that don't know. So people have said that race is harder than Leadville. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's really worth comparing them just because they're really different. Like I know it's a two mountain bike races, but this one's like entirely single track.
It's not high elevation, is it?
Yeah, it is. Park City.
Is.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Right.
So you're 6,000 to 9,000 feet in that race.
Okay.
So
He's
not
got
as
some
high.
skill, too, because it's all single track to go that fast.
Yeah, if anything, he's got a really powerful like mind or like enduring mind because
Professor X.
Yeah, Professor X. Because I find that's like something that even though I'm not stressed out about riding on single track at all. It's not like, oh, it feels narrow, but it adds up, like when you ride it for the whole day.
Cognitive demand, yeah.
Yeah, it really starts to add up. Mm-hmm. And that race, I think, is definitely one. So he mentions that his PR that he got was around 30 minutes faster than last year. And he says, my greatest achievement to date was finishing in front of Katarina Nash in the BC bike race, even if it was only one stage.
That's a huge accomplishment.
Wins.
Yes.
She won a World Cup?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like
she's
many
won
World Cups,
4
right?
World Cups, maybe
She's doing
more.
well
Sorry,
in the
Katarina.
cross realm this season,
yeah,
too.
she's already won a World Cup this year, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. At what, 41?
Yeah, and she is she's a 2-time Winter Olympian, I think 3-time Summer Olympian, something like that, 5-time Olympian.
She's
Daniel,
as
I
legit
checked
as it gets.
to see on that stage if she flatted twice, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
I've cross-raced her before, and she lapped me.
Yeah, she's so fast. And congrats, Katarina. She's a friend of the podcast, and congrats, Katarina, on winning Grinduro.
Yeah,
she just won that over the weekend.
She's off to a good start this year.
Yep, and she did it on a hardtail with like normal XC tires and everything else, and she won Grinduro. So it was all dirt this year. So anyways, interesting stuff. Okay, he says, I have a question regarding altitude training. You always hear sleep high and train low. I understand the rationale for sleeping high, but why train low? I know that when training at altitude, the number of watts you can produce will be decreased, but your body doesn't really care how many watts are displayed on your power meter. So these are all his assumptions here. He says, if physiological adaptation, and in parentheses, he says the increased number and productivity of mitochondria, etc.,
Exactly right.
is the end goal, then why does the altitude at which you create the stimulus matter? If you do an interval with an RPE of 10 at 7,000 feet, does your body respond any differently than if you did the same interval, different watts but same RPE, at sea level? It seems like if you create the demand for energy and oxygen, then your body will work to increase the supply regardless of altitude. Is this inaccurate? Thanks again, Daniel.
It's interesting, and I've wondered this very thing. I've wrestled with this in the past, too. You're kind of mixing stress with strain to some extent, or really stress with stimulus. It's the same stress on the body, but it's not providing the same stimulus. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this.
Cool, yeah.
And I know someone, and this is the misconception, and I think I've even perpetuated this myself in maybe years past, is that if you have more oxygen to work with, then you have a greater work capacity, and this leads to greater adaptations. But that's kind of where it jumps tracks. More oxygen does yield greater work capacity, assuming you're aerobically fit enough, but it doesn't necessarily stimulate more adaptations. You can do more work, but it might not be enough of a challenge to make your muscles realize they need to do more.
Got it.
So it might not provide that necessary stimulus.
So it's not like just a direct, like, because I have more, it will be more.
Nope.
Got it, yeah.
Nope. Nope. And the potential for more work is just that. It's potential. Doesn't mean you're going to be able to do more work. You have to have the muscular capabilities to do it. You have to have the mitochondria. You have to have the oxidative enzymes. There have to be certain things in place, and those are adaptations that take place over time, assuming they're provided a sufficient stimulus. So again, that's where we're going. So
Chad's busting out handwritten notes on this one.
I started scribbling things, and then it evolved, and now I'm going to have to rely on my notes because there's just too much to type in.
Good, okay.
Yeah, it'll go quick.
I'm going to lean back and drink my coffee. I love this.
Cool. All right. Good. Because there's much to share.
I'm barely going to interrupt you.
That was a point for those that don't know.
Okay, I
That
could
was
use
a
the
point that
breather
was
here and
recently
there.
brought up.
Okay, so let's just be clear that when it's competition, that's when we want to exploit work capacity. With workouts, it's not so much about work capacity, it's about training stimulus. Okay, to just reiterate that a second or a third time, whatever. So first, let's talk about what we're trying to accomplish with the whole live high end of things, and then we'll get to the train low. So when you're at high altitude, you're in hypoxic conditions. So the air's thinner, there's less oxygen concentration per volume of air, and this leads to certain things in the body. The kidneys produce more erythropoietin. That erythropoietin goes to the red blood cells and produces more marrow and more hemoglobin. So, in the marrow, it produces more red blood cells and more hemoglobin mass. So you not only have more cells to carry oxygen and shuttle out CO2, but you also have more of the necessary protein that clings to those molecules. And in the end, you increase your oxygen carrying capacity, and this can lift your hematocrit at the same time. So more red blood cells per volume of blood. And this increased oxygen carrying capacity is good, again, if you have the muscular capability to utilize the incoming oxygen. If you don't have the capillary beds, if you haven't undergone the angiogenesis necessary to stimulate those new blood vessels and so that you can impart more oxygen to the muscle. If you don't have the oxidative enzymes to use the incoming oxygen and whatever substrate, the fat or the glucose, it doesn't really matter how much oxygen you can push to the muscle. You also have to be able to utilize it. So this increase in aerobic work capacity is a potential. It's not an automatic. Okay.
Cool.
So erythropoiesis in the case of high elevation is really the name of the game. We want production of more red blood cells. So and that's all good and fine, but like I just said, you also have to have the muscular capacity or the capabilities, and that is why we train low. That's why we train at a sufficient or a low enough elevation to where we can push enough oxygen to the muscles to actually challenge the existing mitochondria. Because if we're pushing oxygen to only a handful of the mitochondria, then what's the stimulus to say I need more mitochondria? I need greater aerobic work capacity. I need greater proliferation or mitochondrial biogenesis. It's not there. So if we don't have enough air to even elicit that or provide that stimulus, then we're not going to get the eventual adaptation.
Right.
Okay. So the stress. Let's see. So if we have a low oxygen concentration, we're effectively blunting the intended stimulus.
Right.
So that's put simply. And what happens is we get a detraining effect. So instead of we're exerting more stress on the body, but in terms of training adaptation, we're actually detraining in the process. Yes, our red blood cells go up, and we now have a greater oxygen carrying capacity, but our muscular capabilities are on the decline. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. And then, so just to kind of drive this home in terms of the efficacy of the whole live high, train low approach, it was back in 2006, John Peter Werlin and colleagues recruited 10 elite athletes and over 24 days. And that's an important point to remember, 24 days. We're not talking about a 1 week or a 2 week modification. This is 3 weeks or plus of living and training at high altitude. And in particular, they lived at 2,500 meters, which is about 8,200 feet. And that seems to be the sweet spot. Somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 meters seems to be the sweet spot for altitude acclimatization. When they trained at either 1,800 meters or 1,000 meters, and that's roughly 5,900 feet, roughly 3,300 feet. And the difference being when they're at 1,800 meters, they did their low or moderate intensity work. That was about 85% of their training. The other 15% was comprised of high intensity interval training, HIIT, and that was done at 1,000 meters. So it's still not sea level. They're still not in the most plentiful oxygen or the richest air, but still plenty of oxygen to do the work. And then what they saw was about a 5% bump in both their red blood cell volume and their hemoglobin mass. So true, they did in fact enhance their oxygen carrying capacity. And because they did it right and they trained low, not just lived high, they also improved their sea level performance by, I think, a similar percentage. But either way, it was measurable, and these are already elite level athletes.
Yeah, I think it was like their actual times were like 2 to 5% faster.
Yeah, which in elites is a big deal.
Oh,
Well, especially
huge.
in that amount of time period. I want to say 2%.
And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That may seem like a long time, and it is for people who are on a just a regular day-to-day schedule and on a budget and have family and other obligations where they can't spend three plus weeks at elevation.
Yeah, it's tough to do.
So,
right?
But this is too, they got to drive down.
Yeah.
It's both.
Yeah,
Like-
and
oh,
they're
yeah,
rare.
true.
Yeah, so it's even more time.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, they're spending a lot of time focused on one particular thing, performance improvement and this particular type of adaptation.
There are rare spots in the world where you can kind of pick and choose like that, right? Like even have access to terrain to be able to train and do that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You have to have a place where you can make all that gel.
I've talked about this before, but I was part of a study to test to work out with more air than sea level.
Yeah.
So that at the gym you
Got to
could put-
comment on that.
Yeah,
An interesting one.
I want that. They were trying to test if it was like safe for people, and I was like one of the people. They're like, "Is this safe?"
Yes,
It was safe.
You were a
but did
lab
it
rat.
yield improvement because
Oh, so it was single blind, and I was doing treadmill tests, and when I had the extra oxygen, my gosh, like it
Sure.
was.
Sure.
It was. I think I was at 26%. I think sea level's like 24%, and I was at 26. And it was just amazing. And we all
In
feel
terms
it
of
too.
amazing, like what, like
in
the
the
feeling.
moment, in
for
terms
the
of
same
performance.
for the same pace, and I did there was like a step test for
No.
the same pace. It was so much easier. Just like when we go to sea level,
Like your RPE was lower.
my
lower-
RP was lower for the same pace in the treadmill.
Yeah, so it felt a little easier to go the same fast
A
pace.
lot easier.
A lot easier.
Just like sea level. You guys sea level walks are
Okay,
huge.
and that's all good and fine. But if you look back at Kilding, and I couldn't find the year on this. I did find the study or my notes on the study, but I couldn't find the year. But it's Kilding is the author of the study, amongst others. They used hyperoxic training to do the very thing that Nate's describing here, and it effectively lowered the HIIT-related improvements. So because they saturated the muscle with oxygen, the stimulus, once again, wasn't sufficient enough to say, need more mitochondria. They were providing plentiful oxygen, and because of it, it actually blunted the stimulus.
Interesting.
Were they going deep?
I don't know. I don't have a whole lot of details on this. I tried to look it up this morning. I kind of ran out of time. But the fact is, it may have improved performance in the moment, but it didn't increase the necessary stimulus for further adaptation.
Interesting.
So I'd like to look at that study because for watts, like it's really easy to measure our performance, right, with watts.
Totally.
And I would think that I would want to do like my VO2 max efforts down at sea level, and I can do like 30 more watts for. Actually, I've taken when we did it in sea level, I have a huge benefit. I've done my 3-minute power for 10 minutes at sea level.
Yeah, I mean, that's an increase in performance, but again, not something that would spur adaptation
Yes,
necessarily. It seems like an artificial alteration.
I think so. I'm drawing like a parallel in my mind with this to back in the day with motorcycles and carburetors. I know they're fuel injected now, but when I was growing up, it was all carbureted. So you decided how much oxygen went in, you decided how much fuel went in, and then it would, if you hit the right mixture, you would get the right amount of combustion, and then things would work right. And I feel like it's interesting
Kind of what's
because when you're
happening in the
talking about
moment.
performance. Yeah, that's like where you want to go. But the interesting thing is adaptation, right? And
Yeah,
so I wonder.
that's in the moment, but what about the after effects?
Exactly right.
We have that study that shows that it did increase their performance over 28 days.
Living high.
Yep.
Living high,
train
increased
low.
it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but we're not talking about saturating the muscle in the moment with extra oxygen.
Yeah, you're talking
Two
about
different
that,
things.
isolating that
it's-
variable. Yeah.
Maybe I'm confused because I don't know how my body knows the difference is if I live high and then I do 1 hour VO2 max workout.
That's the difference between hypoxia and muscle saturation. So the amount of oxygen in the air versus the amount of oxygen being utilized at the muscle.
Yeah.
Two different things.
Yeah.
And a finer
Finish my
point,
sentence.
but an important one.
If I'm living at 8,000 feet and I drive down to sea level and or 55,000 feet like this.
Oh, I see what
study
you're saying.
did,
Yeah, and they did get
They got
benefit
performance
from
benefit,
that.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm living at 8,000 feet, and then I put a mask on myself, and I get the same oxygen as 5,000 feet for those hour workouts, and they're intense, and I'm putting out more watts. I don't understand how there would be a difference between the outcome.
There wouldn't be.
Your body wouldn't know. Unless
There
there's some
wouldn't be.
kind of like pressure thing that I don't.
Because
I'm not
these
aware of.
guys are still living at altitude, though. They're still gaining all the adaptations that come with the hypoxic environment up
Yeah, I'm
top.
saying I'm living at 8,000 feet.
Yep. Yeah. You guys are both saying the same things. I mean, I'm a mediator right now.
No, I hear it too. I know we're saying the same things.
Yeah, you're saying the same things. The point is that what Chad's getting at is whether, in terms of adaptations, what actually helps adaptation, does purely saturating the muscle with more oxygen help adaptation?
Yeah, I don't think
that's what we're
hyperoxic training
unclear
is
on.
going to lead
It's the
to
interesting thing.
faster bike riders.
Yeah.
I think the work has to increase, not just the oxygen.
And that's like kind of the main takeaway. Let's get away from what's going on inside the muscle and then look back at Daniel's question, right? Because Daniel in this case is asking like, why train low? And the point of training low is
to provide a sufficient stimulus.
Yeah, exactly right.
You go harder.
Yep, you can go harder,
Yeah.
you can do more, and you can, especially when you're talking about higher intensity
You basically
training.
have to outpace your muscle's current demands. You have to make all the mitochondria scream for oxygen,
Yeah.
and then basically deny it,
Right.
Rather than provide insufficient oxygen so that you can't even recruit all the mitochondria, which is what happens when you're up at elevation.
And so that's the intent of training low, just to be very literal with his question.
Yep.
So what happens, you might think of, well, why can't I just always train low? Because I'm always going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like, so they've studied this a lot. And then, so you get the benefits of the blood at
Mm-hmm.
8,000 feet or, high elevation. Even here, we get benefits.
Yeah.
You go low, you get the benefits to be able to do more work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wash. It's like the percentage difference of improvement are like
Makes
the
sense.
same. So it's a wash. So this is
Yeah.
why the very best would be if you could live high
Yeah.
and have all the blood, and then you train low and have all the work capacity, and you have to go hard. If you just do, so like to Chad's point,
Agreed.
if you're at doing 300 watt, 20-minute intervals at 8,000 feet, then you do 300 watt, 20-minute intervals at sea level, you're not getting the
Stimulus.
benefit.
Yeah.
But if you can now, like that 300 watts was all out, at sea level, you can go 320 or 330, you'll get a benefit. And that's why, too, they have the people doing HIT stuff, like, and usually VO2 max, too. They really want to take advantage of that extra
exactly
air.
right. Yeah.
So this is also what we have an advantage. If we lived
do.
in Truckee. Truckee's at like 6,200 feet.
Yeah, Incline Village, right?
Yeah, that would be great. But there are mountain bike races and crits at like sea level that we can travel to in the same day.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I actually did that last year where I did a bunch of sweet spot and then my VO2 max workouts, I'm using air quotes, are these really intense on-off mountain bike races with not climbing.
Yeah, and you just saw improvement
some
through the
good
roof,
training,
right?
Yeah, it's nice. So once a week, I could add a very, very intense ride. I mean, it's a race, right? But it's still, I'm getting pegged. And if you have that strategy, it's very unique, though.
Yeah.
Around the world to have to a place that's like so close that you can actually drive down lower.
Yeah.
And then come back.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I mean, and I think you're kind of doing this if you can incorporate a little bit of heat stress into the whole mix.
Oh, yeah.
Which heat stress actually kind of goes the other way, where you train low, live high, train in low temperatures, and then not necessarily live in high temperatures, but expose yourselves to some additional heat after the fact. So a form of living at high temperatures. Then you get the bump in plasma volume on top of all of it. So really, all this hematologic, blood-related adaptation that's super beneficial to endurance performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. So I struggle with this. So we have the sauna here. And I want to use it every time, but it's just a time commitment. I'm thinking about just waiting. Actually, I should be using this week because we're going to Hawaii next week.
I thought the same thing. Just go sit in it, even if I don't tie it to workouts.
I know. I'm just going to wear this, like a button-up shirt.
Gross. Just a sweaty mess.
But I think I was going to do it like we've talked about, maybe like a week before my first mountain bike races. And it'll be snow on the ground in Reno,
Yeah.
just to get that extra benefit.
Extra. And that's the key here, because we've talked a lot about sauna training and how it can benefit your performance in the heat. Well, sitting on a trainer, even with a fan, it still produces a ton of heat. I mean, there's a reason you're sweating. So
yeah.
there's still a lot of heat shock proteins. There's still a lot of the potential improvements in blood plasma. So all those things still come with your workouts. We're just layering a little bit of icing on that cake.
Here's a study I'd like to see. With heat adaptation, we've seen that your short-term performance can increase, right? I want to know that if you do heat adaptation training and you do it for, I don't know, 2 months, and then you compare to people who did the same training but didn't do that, and then you do a washout, like you do 2 weeks of just the standard training without any heat adaptation, and then you do a test, were the performances and the people that trained, like, were they able to go deeper?
Yeah.
The people that trained with heat adaptation, did they have a better outcome?
Yeah.
That
Like a psychological adjustment? Or?
No, like physiological.
Okay.
So after you do a washout, so after all the plasma's back to normal, did that period of being able to go harder
Deliver additional
Physiologically,
adaptation.
Because the plasma volume change is going to
so
be long gone.
it's just like this training low, like being able to go deeper for 8 weeks.
Which smacks of psychology, the deeper part.
being able to put out more watts.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like
Measuring it in terms of performance.
Yeah, exactly. To see like if that 8 weeks.
Sure.
I would think that it would. It was just like this. You have greater work capacity.
Yeah.
So you should be able to. So why shouldn't I be doing this year round? But I don't know. That has to be proven. That's my hypothesis.
If there's anybody that just wants to do studies at our whim, we have plenty of ideas. So we throw them out at all times.
Yep, and I do want to make this is kind of off topic.
Sure.
It's on topic, but it's a bit of a tangent. So low brain oxygenation. We're always talking about muscle oxygenation, but there's also low oxygen to the brain, and this has particular effects also. It can limit basically central drive, so how much your brain will allow your body to work, and
That's why we give up.
yeah, and to an extent, there are forms of adaptation that come along with this, but this central fatigue can actually pull down your work capacity in a kind of an artificial way. I mean, it's a protective mechanism, really. But if you have to compete in high elevation, familiarizing yourself with this sort of brain fog and racing through it can actually be, or it has the potential to be a competitive advantage. So it's something worth considering. I mean, most people I think would probably try to avoid doing workouts in this sort of brain hazy state, but there is a potential competitive advantage.
Yeah. I felt that at Leadville, and you can see that when people are going up Columbine. Not a lot of sharp thinking going on up at that point, right? We're all a little sideways.
Understandably. Yeah.
It's called grit.
But if you've done it before,
People have grit, people don't. That's what you're
but
talking
think
about.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've done it before and you're familiar with it, it doesn't affect you the same way. You know, you don't it maybe doesn't get to you quite the same way because it's at least a little familiar.
I'm almost the opposite. Like the first time is good. The second time, like my grit level goes down.
Really?
Because I
Then
know
you're afraid of it.
exactly. I'm like, this is going to be so much worse at the finish.
It's
Like,
really interesting. It'd be, once again, another study idea. It'd be wonderful to be able to separate out like psychological, or the effect of a person being afraid of what elevation is going to do to them versus what it physically does to them.
They have ways to.
And,
they have some pretty cruel studies.
Yeah, I'm
methods
sure.
to figure out how to.
Because there are plenty of people that I know that they've raced enough in elevation to have a lot of experience, and there are other people just like them, whatever else in terms of where they live. But sure, we're all individual and we all react differently to elevation, that sort of stuff. But there are a lot of people that I know, regardless of the physical side of things, I know that mentally they really kind of shoehorn themselves into a box with elevation. They're kind of like, I'm stuck in here and I can't do well at elevation. And I wonder how much of it is, once again, the psychological effect. Like you said, some people, they go through it once and they're strong. Other people, it hits them, and then after that, they're afraid of going back into that.
Yeah, I mean, same thing could be said with workouts. You do a particularly hard workout, and it just crushes you, and you know you got to do it again or a harder version of it again. You're already mentally checked out.
Builds up fear.
To Jonathan's point, like we have the opposite. I feel like I perform worse at elevation, but better at sea level, and you feel like you don't get the same benefit at sea level, but you get not the same
lesser
degradation.
detriment.
At elevation. And I wonder if there's anything psychological in that, or if it's physiological, because our power meters performance, we race so much together.
Yeah.
That do you notice at sea level I'm like closer to you?
Yeah, definitely. You are like, it's like if we were to move the same race, even though you couldn't do that, you would be much closer at sea level than if we were up at elevation.
He drops me faster at elevation. That's pretty much it. But I don't know if that's something psychological with me or physiological.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing. We can't like separate and unwrap individually. It's really tough to do that.
Tease them.
You
Tease them
know.
up.
In an ideal world, we all at least can manage the psychological component, but it's not just easy to manage. You can't just do that. That's part of the whole entire experience of training.
I'd like to think that I have more to gain at elevation and you have more to gain at sea level. We're just both bad.
Yeah, but we just need to be better.
If we just believe that, it'll happen.
That's what we'll do. I'll stick to it.
That's what it is.
Some product announcements before we go into Sam's question, which is the next one. Outside workouts.
Yes. So, okay. Outside workouts are now available on Wahoo head units. We had them on Garmin, and you can do them. So it's really cool. Also, another announcement is Garmin has in their current beta, you can create your own custom screen and almost like duplicate TrainerRoad. So on the 1030, 830, and 530, you have like a little graph. You have all the data that you need. We're going to have some support articles out and a video that we'll push through the forum too, and we'll mention it on the podcast when that comes out. But it's really cool. You pretty much mimic TrainerRoad on the road.
Yeah. One cool thing, can I throw in on Wahoo really quick?
You can throw in as many cool things as you want and take as much time as you want.
Something unique with Wahoo is that you can pause your workout very easily and then scroll through intervals. So like, let's say, and this is why it's really helpful. Once again, like indoors is so nice because you never have to worry about this stuff, right? But if you're riding outside and you get to the point where you get stuck in traffic or stoplights or something like that, and you don't show up to the point where you need to do your intervals, like let's say it's a consistent pitch of road or something like that, you can pause it and you can either go back in intervals or go forward in intervals. You can move around really easily within the workout and then resume. When you hit resume, it counts you down from 3 and then sends you right back into it. It's a cool feature that's unique to them in this case.
Yeah, so there's the Garmin and Wahoo handle this 2 different ways. Wahoo, when you can pause the workout but keep recording. So that's like it pauses the workout timer, keep recording. Garmin, we have it set up so that if you're about to start a new interval, you have to actually push the lap button to start that. So if you're going to do any kind of interval that you've had like a good amount of rest before, like you're doing a 5-minute interval, 10-minute, or even 3-minute interval, you have to actually push the button. And we've set it up that way because we want you to get to the right part of the road so that you are safe and all that kind of stuff. And you're at train. Where we'll just walk you through on Garmin is if it's like billets or something, 30 on, 30 off.
Yep.
Like you don't want to be pushing pause every time. You just have to get to the set to a point where you can do it. Or I did Spanish needle outside, which was actually kind of fun.
Yeah.
Once it gets to the set to start, you push the lap button, and then it just walks you the whole way.
Yeah, that brain fade you were talking about is real in those moments.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
It's nice to not have to hit the button every time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Which you don't have to on Wahoo either.
I'm just saying it's a different, like on Wahoo, you would pause until you get to the right spot, and then you would push resume. And on Garmin, it will automatically, it'll still record. You don't have to push pause, and then you'd push the button to start.
Yep.
By the way, when I did Spanish needle, I did it with Brandon, and we did it on a hill climb, and I started way before him, and he would Brandon's our 5.2 watt.
Every time he hits it for 30, just
close it. 15 seconds.
His 30 seconds or his 15 seconds would get him a lot further up the hill,
about twice
right?
as far, yeah. It got really annoying.
Yeah. I swear Brandon weighs less than he actually knows or something like that.
I know. He's like 85 pounds.
It's
okay, so the other cool thing is that before you had to put the workouts on the calendar and then flip them over. Now, if you're on the workout screen on the website and in the desktop app, you can just push a button and it will automatically push right to your Garmin or Wahoo. So this is nice because you're not always if you're looking for a workout today and it's not scheduled, which happens, before you had to add it to your calendar and then flip it over. Now you just push one button and it goes to your Garmin or Wahoo automatically.
Send it directly, which is pretty cool.
And this is coming to, we've got a bunch of cool stuff coming out in the mobile app, and this is going to be part of a bigger release on mobile.
So it's basically see workout, send to your head unit. It's that easy.
Yeah, I
It's
gotta
really
start
cool.
riding outside. This is all news
Winter
to me.
now. Chad, it's winter.
Well, we're going to
Read the Slack updates. Next, updated Mac and Windows apps. We released those a while ago. We have native Bluetooth on Windows. So you no longer need that Blue Giga dongle as long as you're on Windows 10. This is amazing.
So
this
nice.
is so much easier.
Yeah.
If you're on one of the older versions of Windows, you should get rid of it and get Windows 10 because you are a Russian farm of something.
They're using you for something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's Microsoft's going to sue me. Update your computer. Also, on the desktop app, before we had a list of calendar. Now it's what everyone wants. It's a grid, just like the website. So we've mimicked the website. It's really cool. You got a grid.
Super nice.
When I say grid, it just looks like a regular calendar.
Right. Yep.
And then we've also released cadence support for Kicker Core and Kicker 2018. So these are firmware updates that you do on your Kicker, and then now you get cadence from that. So if you don't have a power meter, you can now get cadence from your Kicker as you work out.
And it's pretty clever how they do that, really. It just comes down to them like measuring like when kind of the strain and like how the strain's oscillating as it goes through. And it's it's surprisingly accurate at their ability to predict cadence.
Power Tap was the first one to do it, I think.
Doesn't every power meter do that now?
Well, no. So Power Tap on the wheel did it because they didn't have cadence
on the
input.
wheel,
But then other ones, they all had it.
Yeah, and all power meters have accelerometers, and that's how they measure it.
Well, not necessarily.
That's true.
Sometimes it's magnet based, and you got to get the revolution. So to get going too deep, but to get power, you need to have the torque and then the revolution speed. So when it's crankbait, it's cadence, and when it's wheel based, Power Tap did it with how fast the wheel is going. But then it would look into it to look at the little oscillations that you're talking about to see what the cadence is.
Yeah,
and you can usually trick them if you're like super smooth or do something weird. But if you're just pedaling normally, it works.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. Yeah,
and other trainers, the RH Hammer 2 and 3 that we have does it too.
Yep.
Nice.
And the final update too, if you're filtering through workouts and checking through there, we've also updated some of the filters so you can check out for duration and some stuff like that.
Before it was like an hour to 90 minutes, and it was really hard if you wanted to find 90 minutes or an hour 15.
Yeah.
So now we just have them broken out to an hour 15, 90 minutes. And
Much
if there's
easier.
a 91-minute one, it falls into 90 minutes, just how you think it would be.
Constantly improving, and thanks to everybody here at TrainerRoad that works so hard to make that stuff happen. So,
team.
Yep, we're focused on constant improvement. It's a big deal. So, Sam's question, I'm going to summarize. He basically says, how do you guys, and this is answering like so many people's questions that have been submitting them right now for this very thing. Makes sense because it's timely. How do you guys approach the off season? What do you recommend? What changes do you, or do you recommend going between between seasons? So, ton of off season questions. Absolutely makes sense. We've addressed this, we address this every year, and it definitely bears mentioning again since we're already at that time. So, Chad, what's the main priority that you would say in terms of an off-season break, or would you advocate a break?
Absolutely. It's a pretty even split between physical and physiological reset. I mean, on the physiological side, there's potential muscle damage. There's definitely a hormonal reset. On the psychological side, just getting away from the day-to-day obligation of working out once, twice if you're a 2-a-day sort of rider, and then just the stress of the workouts themselves. I mean, even a 60-minute butter burner done on tired legs is a pretty big, and I know we throw cognitive load around quite a lot these days, but it's a big mental stress.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I find that varies for certain people. For certain people, they don't need that break. And I also, like for me, for example, right now, I don't need that break because I haven't been able to train consistently in a long time.
Yeah,
now.
It depends, how far you pushed yourself.
Yeah, so there's one side of don't feel obligated that you need to take time off if you don't feel like you need it.
No, yeah.
But at the same time, it kind of is tricky. Like we have to make sure that we have a good fix on how we actually feel, because there are a lot of people that may be really consistent training themselves, and we'll get into this later with another question, but kind of training themselves into a hole. So
you got to be honest with yourself.
Yep. Yeah.
Some of y'all have had July, August, and September as off season. And you're like, now I need off season. But if you look at it, you're doing 1 to 2 rides a week, like not a lot of stress. But I mean, honestly too, though, maybe 1 to 2 rides was your consistent training.
Yeah.
And with some people's life and stuff, that you might still need an off season or switch it up.
Yeah.
Chad, this is going to sound like a joke, but it's not. Okay.
Okay.
During the off season, how much Popeye's chicken should I eat?
Nate's asking for him.
However much you want to. I honestly, I can't get behind it because it's just.
No, okay. Here's this: how much during the the bigger question?
I'm all about
is,
indulgence. If
how
that's
much
what you're asking?
Yes, during indulgence during off season, how much should I do? Because you can do too much.
Absolutely can. I basically limit it to a 1 to 2% body gain. So if I know what my ideal race weight is, I'll try not to let myself get more than 2% away from that.
I love that.
Because coming back from farther than 2% is really discouraging, and it really just gums up the works in the early stages where you need motivation most.
The other thing that I see happens with me as a naturally software engineer body type is that if I stop,
Very desirable.
the ladies love me.
I've never heard the body type, the software engineer body type defined.
On those little dating profiles you do the roll down.
That's
Not
pretty
all
funny.
software engineers are like this, but the classic Silicon Valley, like my body wants to be skinny and not do anything, like muscle wise, skinny fat.
Right,
My
like
body wants to be
naturally.
skinny fat. What I find is if I don't work out, I will lose muscle mass and then gain fat, and the body will be the same kind of weight, which gets dangerous,
yeah.
right?
Sure. Yeah.
'Cause
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, we should be paying attention to body composition. So if you have access to, even a cheap $30 scale can give you some idea of whether or not your composition is shifting.
So looking at that is very important. And then I've done it on DEXA, and man, it hurts.
It's deflating, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is, so if you're looking to, and I mean, in my mind, you should always be looking toward productivity with your off season. And I don't mean productivity in terms of always making sure that you're getting ahead for training, but it might just be productivity, like we said, like a psychological reset in some way. Like it should be your off season. We should always be improving in life in one direction or another. And your off season, hopefully that prepares you to go into the next season better.
The objective is still to get faster next season, and there are a lot of things you can do
Totally.
a lot of things you can put in place that set the stage for that.
We get so many questions on strength training. Sorry, Nate.
No, go ahead.
We get so many questions on strength training, and I feel like it's always really hard if you're like mid-season in a build phase or a specialty phase, and then now you're going to start strength training. And I'm not saying that that's a bad time necessarily to start it, because if you're doing no strength, if you're doing no strength training, I still think it's really important just for overall health to be doing that.
It's never a bad time for it.
But it's so easy, or relatively easy, to start off in the off season with it and kind of establish a routine, get yourself used to the movements when perhaps the training isn't as critical for your goal race. And then you can modify it.
There's never a bad time to start. It doesn't mean you have to dive headlong into a really intense training routine. You can kind of start to weave things in, even if it's just I'm going to kick off I'm in the middle of a race taper and I'm going to start strength training. That may sound like an idiotic thing to do, but it can be planks. I mean, maybe that's the one thing. Maybe that's what gets the ball rolling. So you can start at any time. It's a question of how you start it.
And we have Chad's strength training recommendations.
Yes, we do.
To find them, Jonathan, we need a URL. It's probably going to happen in Kona, but not sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you go to forum.trainerroad.com and you look for that, or on the blog, you'll be able to find what
Chad's
they are right
strength
there.
training recommendations.
Yep, just look for
Google that. I bet you'll find
Coach Chad's strength training, and you'll find it. Tucker will also be putting it into forum.trainerroad.com.
He Googled it and it came up.
On episode 223.
There we go.
What I want to do too is make a little. Someone else did it, but I want to put it on TrainerRoad.com.
Yep.
I shouldn't say the URL yet because
Yeah.
that could be debated.
Don't say it yet.
But I want to do it where you put in the numbers and you get it, but you put the numbers in and we do all the math for you.
Yeah.
But my point on this is that with strength training, to your point too, it's from like going from one strength level to the next strength level that is stressful. Once you get to it, it's not as stressful. So during this time when it's kind of, you could even do it when you're not cycling, get to that level 1 or level 2 level of strength, and then you can just maintain that.
Enter a holding pattern.
Exactly. And then you're not as, like, strength training wipes me out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Makes
yeah.
me so tired.
Oh, yeah. It can be hugely stressful,
And
or a lot of strain.
And for those that have listened to previous episodes of the podcast, they'll know this, but the strength training recommendations that we're talking about are benchmarks of strength. We're not talking about exercises that you should do.
And they're aimed at endurance athletes too. So any strength athlete would look at that and probably mock us, but it's...
Yeah, they're just benchmarks. Basically, like the question that it answers is, how many pull-ups should I be able to do as a cyclist, or how many X what should I be able to do? Because one thing,
as I see it,
as Chad sees it,
yes.
and because the one thing is with a lot of us Type A athletes that are listening to this, we go up to the chin-up bar, and if you're a cyclist, if you're a triathlete, you probably do chin-ups all day, and you look amazing and chiseled, whatever else. But us cyclists, we're like T-Rexes. So when we get on there, we don't know when we should stop.
Not big muscles over here.
not Coach Chad. No, heavens no. But for us, we don't know where we should be or where we should stop. We don't know what's normal, because if you pick up men's fitness, it's going to tell you something for a very different sort of athlete.
Never pick up
When
men's
to
fitness.
maintain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when enough is enough, and where you should coast and maintain there. Not coast, just pedal. But with that, is there anything else that you guys would say is important to do with the off season?
Yeah, I want a lot of emails, so I just got to say, here at TrainerRoad, the software body, probably the person with the biggest muscles and lowest body fat is a software engineer.
Software engineer, yeah.
He looks crazy. We're just joking today that people accuse him of steroids.
Yeah, actually, when he was in Mexico at one point, he was called Captain America.
Stupid.
Yeah, but in
rightly
Spanish.
so.
What was it?
Yeah, Capitan Americano.
Yeah, exactly. That's what all
They liked him a lot.
the Mexicans were saying to him. So.
Big, strong dude. Yeah.
So it's not all software engineers. I'm just...
Yeah. One thing I would say is the habit of consistency. You can wrap up that habit of diligence and consistency, but just kind of package it slightly differently. Because if you lose that, it's kind of hard sometimes to get back just on that horse of being consistent when diligent with something.
Yeah, and if it can rearrange your schedule unfavorably, so you can end up with all the time you used to dedicate to getting on the bike in the morning or in the afternoon or the evening or whatever it is, gets siphoned off into some other activity, and then that activity becomes the new norm, and now you have to figure out how to weave your workout schedule back into your new schedule, and it just gets too tricky. So leave that time as it is, spend it in another way that is easily swappable.
Yeah.
Other thing is, I'm experiencing this right now. I just did the RAM test, and my FTP is 323. It went from 340 or 345 down to that, and my weight went up too, which is kind of sad, especially as we go into Kona.
Good in time for Kona.
Yeah, right, just in time.
Yeah.
But I had an off season, a lot of travel, and I got sick. To be okay with that, but you can also use our season function because what's really important is our year-over-year comparison. So the season function, I can see as I do these workouts, how do I compare to 2 weeks into my off season last year, and if that's up 5-10 watts, I'm super happy.
Instead of just looking at October to October.
Yeah, or like peak fitness to today.
Yeah, which is really what almost always happens with PRs. That's why we designed the whole PR thing that doesn't just compare you to your peak fitness, but to your current progress.
Yeah, exactly, compared to other seasons. So
use
that. It's on the website. Seasons. It's under personal records. You can create seasons, and then you can compare. And you click a little button. It's called Season Match. So you can see that, like, as I'm walking through here, how are my workouts doing compared to this time last year?
Yeah, or this time in that previous season.
Yeah, it could be previous season, even earlier in the year.
Yep, I make seasons for my off season. I know that sounds silly here, but it's awesome. Basically, I separate the off season time.
Oh, sure.
And I separate it all, so then I can box things and then have fair comparisons, because that's a really important thing for a lot of us. You know, we'll get a complex real quick and a lot of people get really discouraged if we fall into that. So it's a really good way to separate that and to give you a fair comparison. Complex avoided.
You could even compare your off seasons. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's helpful.
Well, I joke about Popeyes. I haven't had Popeyes in 2 years or something. But another thing that has happened to me, which I have broken, and I'll tell you how I broke it, is I start to eat bad food. And man, that first time you feel awful, but then you start to crave it more often, and you eat more and more. Does anyone else? Does this happen to anyone else?
Oh yeah, it happens all the time.
Not Chad. Chad's.
No, I mean, I eat it and then I feel terrible and that's it.
I feel terrible each time. But my
just draws him in tractor beam.
But the cravings happen like before.
I understand that. Yeah.
Like McDonald's breakfast, would never eat it.
Yeah.
And then I have a tour of Italy and some other stuff.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, that's
some French fries.
It's engineered to do that very thing.
I know.
You eat it, and in the moment you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this to myself. And then 3 hours later, you're like, I can't wait to do that
to myself. Hooks your body, hooks your brain.
So I did that for like 3 weeks, and that does not help.
Not so much.
So I've canceled, and what I did is I started reading the Endurance Diet again every night before I go to sleep.
Motivates you.
I just love that book, and it's just it's just pretty much eat a bunch of whole foods, a variety of them, eat carb centric, and eat enough. And instead of having fried foods, I'm eating whole foods.
No fried foods ever. Anyone?
Well, even he says, you might say never, but he's like, if you can have little bits of indulgences all the time.
Always.
But if you don't have any,
but I can't
you
see
have these binges.
as anything more than just further oxidative stress for my cells to try to handle.
I know, it's just hard. Like with the world we live in, to like never ever.
It is
Chad,
until
if you
you
have
decide
kids,
not to.
They have French fries.
I've
like
been
take
around
one French fry.
fries. No, I'm telling you, you can resist it. It's called abstinence. I mean, you just choose.
You?
I absolutely do. I can't remember the last time I had a fried piece of food.
Leadville.
What'd I have?
Fried nachos.
Fried nachos. I don't even remember this.
Okay.
They were fried?
Yeah.
Nachos are fried.
Yeah.
I mean, chips are fried.
Yeah.
Oh, chips. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
You're right. Chips.
See? Yep. We all got our things.
The point is, absolute abstinence, yes, while it is the ideal way, it can also be kind of psychologically difficult to manage and damning. It really is like what he talks about in that book.
It sets you up for binges.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're solid like Chad.
Yeah, exactly.
We do
no breaking.
make our own
Strong-willed.
tortillas now. I mean, cut tortillas and bake them.
Nice.
So, I mean, every
next
effort
level.
is being made to avoid, in particular, fried foods, amongst others.
Yeah.
I think tortillas are
It's
normally
step by
fried.
step.
They're just cooked on a
Tortillas,
heart.
no. But
Yeah.
when you fry those tortilla chips.
Oh, you're
They become
baking
chips.
tortilla chips.
Baking them.
Yeah,
I got you.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Flour chips. Okay, Matt's question. Actually, first, we need to congratulate you, Nate. You got your Cat 2 upgrade.
I'm now Cat 2.
You're a
So-
big deal.
We're going to have like a retrospective on this process because you got
Really?
it in 1 year. Yeah, we're going to do it right now. You went 5 to 2. You went 5 to 2 in a year.
I can't wait to never place in a race again.
That's there are memes about that.
you
Like
enjoyed
once
Yeah.
you go to Cat 1, like P1 2, like once you move to Cat 2, it's like congratulations, you're never
You'll
going to
never,
place well
never
again.
see the podium again.
And when I went from 5 to 2 in a year, like I submitted my upgrade in January for 4.
Yeah.
So I didn't
So-
actually do the 5 races in the year, but the 5 races don't even matter.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to ask you just a few basic questions. What did you feel like you did really well throughout this process?
I raced a lot,
Yeah.
and I did a lot of volume.
Yes.
Like a lot of volume. I was very consistent all year. I didn't get sick until Eurobike
Yes.
all year
So you
round.
stayed healthy, too.
Yeah.
Yep. So
That's a big deal.
Huge deal. And I think a
Doesn't
lot of that.
disrupt your continuity, yeah.
Yeah, it was the sinus rinses that I've talked about before. I think I had
And your dietary changes.
a low grade infection for like
A long time.
years. I don't know. I always had yellow mucus, and I did this rinse. Now I always have clear mucus. I thought that yellow mucus was just the way to go.
Yeah.
At the same time you changed your diet, or were the dietary changes already in place?
You know, I did a lot of things at once, but I mean, my diet hasn't. No, because I changed my diet like 3 years ago, and you can see my volume over years increase.
And for you, what is high volume? What have you ratcheted up to?
8, 9, 10 hours per week. Some weeks a little more than that, but most of my indoor, and that's with structured workouts, right? Not just on the road.
Sure.
Lots of intervals, lots of 90-minute workouts, and then later in this year, I was bumping them up to 2-hour workouts or even more, using the extend ride feature. So I either do like 2 hours of sweet spot or something, or I do an hour or 90 minutes of intervals and then extend that at
Tack
the
on
end.
some endurance work.
In terms of what enabled you to upgrade as you did, what do you think was the biggest improvement? What I'm getting at that is like, it could be a specific thing in terms of like, I raised my sustainable power or my repeatability, or it could be my race tactics or my race prep, whatever it is.
3 things. One, having a high FTP on flat races is good.
Yeah.
Especially 340 up here is more like 355, 360 down at sea level.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people that are at that threshold. I mean, it's just it's rare.
It's a differentiator for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then conserving energy in the pack and using it when I needed to. And then the race videos, almost every single race that I did is on YouTube in our race analysis series. We've got a few, Tucker, to do still.
Yeah. Even today, we're going to be prepping some that'll be coming up soon.
Cool.
So,
yeah. And being able to then, like, Pete helped me a lot with tactics in that. So that helped. And then I think on the longer road races too that I did well in, I feel like I ate more than everyone. And then I was like, people that would beat me in shorter races, on the longer races, they would just fade away and cramp.
Yeah.
And that's the best feeling when you're scared of somebody and then they start cramping. Chaz
You're
Halbert,
Superman all of a sudden.
I'm looking at you. Yes, exactly. Like, you're like, the whole thing's different now. Like, I can, it's like Matthew
a lot more
Vanderpool when he
fun.
dropped out of Worlds.
I know.
I bet that group was like, oh my.
Every one of their souls buoyed.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is possible. From before, they're like, how am I going to get second, right?
I think everybody, when you saw him in that group, it was like everyone was like, "All right, so where are we going to
When's it
face?
gonna happen?"
Where are we going to finish behind this guy?" Right? And then that happened. Cool.
Bit of a shock.
The hard parts, so I raced a lot, and racing a lot helps. And I did win some races, but getting some second and thirds. One thing that's like really hard is doing like 2 to 3 races in a row because I was racing lots of categories. And I feel like the harder categories are always later too, it seems like. Golden State, there was, I think I did like 6, 7 races over the weekend. They got worse and worse, and I was in. Especially
Imagine
Don't
that.
say.
But for volume, it's good, right? So if you look at my overall trajectory, it's good. But what the problem that I did is I would race the first race thinking about the other 5 races.
Yeah, instead of just going all in on it.
Instead of going all in, get the points for that one, and then saying,
That's it.
whatever happens
It's
after
a
that.
big cross section of experience, though. I mean, you get to race fresh, you get to race mildly fatigued, heavily fatigued. Different strategies need to be employed under different circumstances. That's a lot of learning potential.
And racing frustrated. So when you do something silly in the first race, and then you try to do the opposite in the
Catches
second
you
race.
in the next 5 races.
Yep, but then you do the opposite thing you do is also silly.
Go way too far.
Exactly. You're like, oh, I should have been more aggressive. Then you get too aggressive. Those are not good.
Well,
That's
that kind of
like a
answers
road
the-
racer's existence right there.
But basically, what I've seen, what I think I see in NorCal racing against people who are stronger than me or can beat me, is that I put out less power. I do less work than them until it really matters. I see so many people do these like flyers or attacks, people with bigger FTPs than me, that I like, why are you doing it so early? There's no one with you. Why are you going so hard? Like, you're not going to be able to take us all for the whole time.
You also have, and for I mean, I'm sure people have picked up on this on the podcast, but you have a very pragmatic way of viewing everything, and you're very like procedural, and there's like it's almost like binary. You're just like, this is a bad decision, this is a good decision.
Pragmatic's
My
the right
wife
word.
calls me black or white.
Yeah, and from like the software engineering side, it all makes sense, but
Very logical.
yeah, and that is unique because road racing, especially in a pack environment, is so heightening in terms of like emotionally speaking. and a lot of people make very irrational decisions, and we don't necessarily and sometimes we have the fitness to cloud those, and we start to think that they're a good idea. But you stay very rooted. This is me complimenting you in a very long way, Nate. But you stay very rooted in like pragmatism, where you're just like, this is the principle here is this, and so as a result, this is bad or this is good. Yeah. And I feel like that's why when you see a person take a flyer like that, you're just like, no, plug in the ones and zeros, and this is wrong. You know?
It served you well to this point. I question how well that approach is going to work going forward. I mean, there's still some of it needs to be carried over, but I think you're going to have to race a little more emotionally, take more chances.
I love when he
more
does
mistakes.
This.
That's it.
It's like so motivating,
Nate
right?
loves challenges.
I'm gonna have a 480 watt FTP.
Do it.
Yeah,
No, that won't happen.
The reason you're saying that though is because you can play off of those emotions, right? Like of other people.
You have certain luxuries in the lower categories you're not going to have in the upper categories.
Opposite, I think.
Oh,
I'm going to explain two things, and I'll go back to that.
Yeah.
One other thing that happens that I see a lot in lower category racing is the idea that everyone's like, you got to be the first 5 riders, and you got to like stick that wheel. I wish the Land Park one, the first Cat 3 race that I won, I was just floating. Like, you can surf wheels, and especially, I've talked about this before, but if it's strung out and it's a race with lots of technical, yes, you got to be up front. You don't want to crash. When it's a wide road and it fans back and forth, there's these accelerations that happen, and some people accelerate so hard to stay inches away from that wheel.
Yeah.
It's hard mentally, it's hard physically, where
It's a ton of work for little gain.
exactly, I'll float back 4 wheels, and then it will fan out, and then I'll roll up 10 wheels, and then I'll just do that. And I'm not really doing much work at all. I'm, spiking up to 400 watts. These other people are spiking up to 8, 9, 1,000 watts.
Yeah.
Sure.
But of course,
And like you said, in lower categories, it's definitely prevalent.
this happens in Masters 1, 2, 3 racing with
sure.
world champs in it.
But I would say that it's more prevalent for sure in the lower categories to see that. Yeah.
Look at Pete's races. Same thing happens too in his. It depends. On some courses, it is pinned.
Yes,
and if you're
that's
not in
what
the
I'm getting
front,
at.
like San Rafael, if you're not in the front, like you're never. It's really hard to move up.
Yep. Yeah.
This is very. So I think this is why this has come out is it's very course dependent, and people have done poorly in races that you have to be in the front, and it's really hard to move up. And if you drop a wheel, you're gone for good. And then they put that on all races, and people think I have to do that all the time, which you don't.
Yeah. Is there one thing that you would have done differently going through this whole thing? Do you wish you didn't do something?
There are some races that I wish I would have done, especially some rain races where there's like 11 people, and 11's like a magic number for getting more points.
Yeah.
That were flat, and
For upgrade points, by the way, you can go to blog.trainerroad.com, and we have a whole article on USAC upgrade points.
I think I looked at that one like over 100 times. It's a good article, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Other than that, I probably would have trained my sprint outside more. We did that sprint training thing later on. I dropped my chain, and I'm just scared to death of training.
Yeah. Of sprinting. Yeah.
Big gun shy.
No,
Fair.
I can sprint in a race, and I'm not scared.
Sprint training, I should say.
Sprint training,
Because
yeah.
you just said training, and I know that you're not afraid of training. So you train a lot.
I could have upgraded a lot faster. I lost a lot of races by a wheel or half a bike length.
So let me ask you, what's on tap for 2020 now that you're Cat 2?
You had another thing though. The upper category. Yeah. So this is part of it.
I think what I'm saying is you're going to have to race a bit more on instinct, less on this pragmatic approach. That's the point I'm trying to convey.
It's
Got
all,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My instinct is pragmatic. No, wait, so this is what happens in Northern California racing is that at the beginning of the year, the first Cat 3 race, no one cares about me. They're all looking at Jonathan. That's great. That's the best way to race.
For him.
It is. No, it's for me.
me.
You can make more moves. People let you go. A lot of the upper category races are people letting people go, or you get in the right mix.
Yeah.
As the year went on, I got to be more marked, and people would follow my wheels. It got a lot harder. I'm racing Masters 35 plus 1, 2, 3. People don't mark me. There's so many other people. There's national champs.
Yeah.
My last race, I broke away from the field, and I gave up too early. I got second, and Josh Carling, the great sprinter, he beat me at the end, and I pretty much gave him a 1 lap lead out. But not being marked like that,
How kind.
that's a move that wouldn't have worked in like a Cat 3 race for me, but it does work in a 1, 2, 3. And I'm hoping that I go to the P1-2 race, at least for a little bit, that I can take advantage where no one cares about me.
You'll be an unknown, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they are stronger than me. So, like, why cover me?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what my idea now is for 2020, I am getting older. I'm 37. I'd really like
You don't say you're getting older, huh? Sorry, just
Okay.
just kind of funny. Like, yeah, I know. We're getting older.
I'm older in comparison to P12 racers.
Sure.
And the older I get, like if I was 27, I probably have plenty of time to get a Cat 1 upgrade.
Yeah.
I want to get a Cat 1 upgrade because it's like qualifying for Kona. It's like just a checkbox, an achievement to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't really change my life at all.
Yeah.
Question is, should I focus on Cape Epic and mountain biking or try to get the upgrade points? I'm going to try to do the road race points. We've talked about it. We think Cape Epic is not technical, and I'll have a
Relatively speaking.
Yes, I'll have a better time if I just get a high FTP. So my strategy is, Pete thinks I should just do some of these crits. I can get lucky in a crit, especially if you get in a breakaway.
You can, yeah.
All the teams are represented. You know, you got to beat 5 people,
There
and
are
maybe
a fair amount of dudes who've gotten Cat 1 upgrades that I'm not sure they really earned it. But, you know.
Yeah, you got to get in the right mix. So it's even more strategy, I think, in P12 is if all the big teams are represented in breakaway and you're there, and especially then if you get fourth, you still get some points, right? I'm also going to go after Cat 2 races. So there a Cat 1, 2, 3 or a P12 stage race. I'm going to get slaughtered.
Sure.
Like slaughtered.
Yeah.
Cat 2 only with a flat time trial that's time based. Maybe I can get top
do pretty
5,
well.
get some
That
points.
was my approach, and that's what Brandon did, and I don't think it worked for either of us very well.
What Brandon need? He did 2 races and got his upgrade.
Yeah. Yeah, it works pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in terms of... No, but he had the same complaints I had, that there's no cohesion. There's just a bunch of free agents. Everybody wants to
That
win.
happened.
That's Cat 2,
Yeah.
yeah.
That happened, but still, he didn't have a team too, but he was just so fast. He did time trials that were uphill, so he was either first or second in the GC.
Yeah, he picked the right courses, sure.
Yeah.
So you need 35 points to upgrade to Cat 1. 10 of those points can be done at a local race series or Masters Racing. Some people might say, why aren't you just doing Masters Racing? I am going to save those 10 points to try to get them all in Reno Racing. I'm thinking this is going to take me 2 years at least to get to Cat 1, hopefully, knock on wood. So get those 10 points in Reno. And then the other 25 in Cat 2 races. I might be flying around the country, cherry pick a Cat 2 race that is maybe not in NorCal. Because NorCal, I don't know. I think it's hard.
Yeah.
You see a lot of rainbow jerseys or stripes in your field.
A lot of stripes on sleeves. Yeah,
I know,
that's for
which
sure.
is hard. So basically, I'm going to do
Stage races
and crits.
and crits. Cool.
Yeah.
Matt's question, he says, hey guys, love the podcast, 5 stars all around. I think I've listened to every episode and wanted to share the good news about the often discussed topic of low versus high volume training. Long story shortened a bit, I had a coach from November 2018 through May 2019 and went on a prescribed low volume 140.6 plan by him, even though I only planned to race in 70.3s. I ended up deciding to do the low volume base build and specialty TrainerRoad 70.3 plan starting in June 2019 and just raced Augusta 70.3 to a personal best, all while feeling great during and after the race. Nice job.
Very nice.
Way to go. PB time. Says, my question is this. Looking at the rest of 2019 and into 2020, will I continue to see results if I stay on the low volume 70.3 plan while increasing my FTP at each ramp test? Or will I see a flattening in performance on the run and swim? Thanks for all your great information and keep up the great work. Thank you. And if you don't mind, Chad, I just want to rephrase this kind of before you jump in on this.
Sure.
But this is basically what we're getting at here for any sort of person listening to this, cyclist, mountain biker, cross racer, whatever it is, triathlete, is the core question is, can I get faster if I do the same training plans? And in this case, the context that we're adding on is just making sure that I reassess my FTP and that thusly the workouts are getting tougher as I get stronger.
Yeah. So theoretically, yeah, if you can do the same plan over and over and over again if every time you're doing it with a higher FTP. So if you come into it with higher fitness and then elevate that fitness and then restart it with even higher fitness,
Sure.
yes, that could go on theoretically forever. But at some point, that low volume plan is not going to yield FTP improvement.
I would say any volume plan.
Any volume plan, yeah, anything that your body eventually habituates to the point where it's not serving as further stimulus. You're not going to get faster.
Yeah, we've all felt that too, right? Like, I mean, when I first started cycling, I remember I had no clue what I was doing, and I was just like, if I can make it to the top of this climb without taking a break, right? And then at some point that just became not difficult. And it's not as if we've reached some barrier and that stops, But I feel like a lot of us quit paying attention to that because
That's one factor.
The failure point isn't as prevalent in our minds, right? And also in bike racing, you don't often win, so we don't see that as like an indication of the fact that we need more. So it's kind of an easy trap to fall into.
And this is actually kind of an opportunity for me to address something that I said a couple weeks back, where I talked about I'm really just concerned most of the time with athletes hitting their intervals 90%. 90% works. In this case, not so much. And as you ascend the ranks, as you start pushing up into higher and higher wattage, as you start pushing 4.5, 4.8, whatever, watts per kg, you have to get tighter and tighter with those margins. So whereas 90% used to be acceptable, now it's 92, now it's 95, now it's 99. You really have to nail those workouts if you're going to be on the same volume plan for a long period of time and you still are chasing improvement. You're going to have to do something better in order to make the same thing continue to work.
So same volume plan, low volume, do it for 2 or 3 years, keep improving. Then someone plateaus. What do they? This is an easy question, but what do they do after that?
They got to change something, and that's it. I mean, they got to change something, and typically it's volume. I mean, we have to add more volume. And we've talked before about how you can continue to add intensity, but even if you're working within the confines of, say, a 90-minute high intensity, some sort of high intensity interval workout, you can only do so much within 90 minutes. There has to be some downtime. You can only pack in so many 2-minute repeats into even a 90-minute effort. And even then, you can only pack in so many of those, period. Your body can only handle so many.
Yep.
So you can probably cram more into a 90-minute workout than your legs can actually fulfill.
I'm going to say this again. So you have to increase volume. And at first, you're probably, especially if you go to mid and high volume, you're increasing intensity with your volume. But then there's a point where every body can't take anything more.
Yeah.
And you're increasing then usually aerobic. Where that switch off point is going to be probably a little bit different from everybody. Maybe you do mid volume and that's enough intensity and you're just adding aerobic rides to it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do high volume and then add aerobic, but you're probably really, 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 really fast.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
going from a low
seriously.
volume, he's talking a tri-plan, but they scale pretty much like the road plans too. There aren't huge jumps between low to mid to high, but they do bring with them improvement pretty consistently. So it's not to say you have to completely change everything. If you were doing 8 hours, now you got to do 14. Jumping from 8 hours to 10 hours can make a substantial impact.
That's hard to do too.
It's
8
really
to 10
hard.
is hard.
Yeah.
It's really
That's
hard.
more than a 20% increase.
Yeah. Or let's just say 6 to 8. I mean, that can be the difference for an
It's even
entire
larger.
season.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've mentioned this before, but we're talking about almost purely structured work too in this case, and we're talking about those sort of that sort of time that you're putting in. So just for point of context for people, I'm gonna kind of run off of the list that we have here, but I can imagine somebody listening to this and being like, okay, well, like my lifestyle, my job, family, everything else simply only allows me the time that I'm currently putting in. So how do I get more out of it? And here's just like one bit of advice that I usually have in that regard is that many times if you have a lifestyle that's like you're just squeezing in your training, probably you have a lot of room to improve on the recovery side, and you might even get more out of your current training that you're doing. Like you might not have to change a whole lot in terms of what you're doing on the bike, but off the bike, if you just recover better with better food, better sleep quality or amount, incorporating things that might allow you to recover in another way in your lifestyle.
And that's why I say you have to change something. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to change your training. It can mean you change some other aspect. Maybe you're only sleeping 6 hours a night. Well, make sure you're sleeping 8 because that'll make a huge difference.
Yeah.
Maybe you just changed jobs. Maybe you just moved. Maybe you didn't realize that even though I'm doing this same plan a third time over, I'm still seeing improvement because probably something else changed.
Yeah.
So you have to change something. But if all other things being equal, same plan, no longer yielding improvement, probably going to have to change the volume.
This is off the top of my head. But
it's Wild West right now.
if, let's say, time strapped, you're on a plan, low volume, I cannot increase any volume, right? I would think that I would probably focus then more on like dietary and like fat adaptation things. Like, because if I've talked about this before of like, you want to increase your FTP, and then kind of get that like burn more fat as you're working out. But I would do more fasted rides and see how much more I could do.
That's a change.
That's additional stimulus on your system without increasing time.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like I said, all other things being equal. But
Yeah.
all things not being equal, there are a lot of different things you can change.
And it's particularly apt in this case when we're talking about, full distance triathlon, some long course stuff. That's like where you're talking about the fat.
And it could be the
stuff.
composition of your training too. If all you ever do is sweet spot and now you start doing VO2 max, there's a change, and that's a pretty substantial one.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like if you getting to this, if a person's stuck kind of against like something like we're talking about this, you can also change things up.
Yeah, this is just a time constraint. We're not talking about repeating the same plan, obviously. We're talking about doing different workouts within the same framework.
Yeah.
Too, before I would do those type of fat adaptation changes, I would try to optimize body composition. So
Right.
you
It
have
doesn't even have to be about fat adaptation. It can be about simply improving your aerobic capacity, your fat metabolizing capacity.
I'm saying if you only have 4 hours per week to train, why not try to get your body fat lower? Just eat less to get your body, because if we
Another
all
change, yeah.
probably have a couple pounds to lose.
Sure.
So not you,
But
but
he pointed to the camera with everybody listening to this. You're fine. You're great.
fine.
You look
but,
wonderful. Yeah.
Everyone here at the table, you can all lose a couple.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Always,
that's another
yeah.
way. That's another way of training, and I've done that before when I travel.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, my training is going to be salads and veggies and
Yeah.
no hamburgers and French fries.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we go into Dan's question? It's about seated and standing, or seated versus standing climbing. We've talked about this before. We're going to take kind of like a unique angle on this to a certain degree, but Dan pitches a unique one. So he says, I started cycling 3 years ago and have always considered myself more engineered towards longer climbs and seated efforts, but comparatively weak at sprinting and anaerobic end of things. When tackling long climbs, I would usually spend about 90% of the time in the saddle, tapping out a rhythm, safe in the knowledge that this is the, and he says in quotes, most efficient way to go about it. This year, however, everything seems to have changed. After joining the Navy in September of 2018, I was forced to spend over 3 months off the bike as I went through officer training and wasn't able to return to a regular training regime until April of 2019. To make up for this layoff off the bike whilst in Naval College, I took to running to maintain as much fitness as possible, and alongside this, obviously had to complete the military fitness aspects. I took to running quite naturally and have maintained it fairly consistently in my training schedule this year. On returning to the mountains this summer, I've noticed that I much prefer to climb out of the saddle compared to before, now spending about 50% in and 50% out of the saddle when I'm going up a climb. More worrying, though, is that my power out of the saddle is always higher than that in the saddle for the same rate of perceived exertion. As a test, I spent 10 minutes out of the saddle on a climb, climbing at 330 watts at an RPE that resembled high-tempo sweet spot from my training history. With my current fitness level, I'm sure that maintaining that power for the same period while seated would push me to absolute exhaustion. And he's talking about a 10-minute duration here, just to recap that. So what is the reason for this change? Is it because of running, maybe a bike fit issue, more strength training needed, or maybe something else? Thanks for the help. 5 stars for the podcast and TrainerRoad. And you can leave that, by the way, on iTunes or wherever else you're listening to this podcast. We hugely appreciate it. If you don't feel like we deserve 5 stars, just let us know what we can do to earn it. You can do that at trainerroad.com/podcast. It says, looking forward to getting back on the trainer as he begins Project 2020.
Before I let you guys go into this and assume that he's correct, Dan, I do not like your testing methodology. I think if you really want to do this, go 10 minutes all out of the saddle. Then on a different day, go 10 minutes all out in the saddle. Yep. I think all the time people think it's a certain way, but it's not that way. And saying that you do it in sweet spot and based on RPE, you got to go all out to really test yourself. So I think for this question, though, we're going to assume.
We're going to roundtable this for sure.
Yeah.
We got a lot to contribute. Each of us, I know it.
Yeah.
First off, continue to feel safe in the knowledge that this is the most efficient way to go about it, staying seated. Because even if you generate more power out of the saddle, I promise you that for every bit of energy you're putting into it and the watts that you're getting out, you're expending more bodily energy. There's more muscle mass contributing.
Right.
So you may see more power, but you're pulling on different energy resources, ones that are more finite. And it's just more muscle doing more work.
Yes.
So the efficiency will remain highest while on the saddle. There are a few people, if any, man. I mean, there might be just some world-class Richard Virenque type long, lanky climbers who get out of the saddle and remain as efficient standing as they do seated, but they are in the far, far, far minority.
Yeah, it'd be tough. I mean, that's why we all like to sit down. Like, to keep it very simple, right? Like, because it's more efficient for our body.
And it's wonderful that a stronger body yields these opportunities that provides you with a chance to get out of the saddle and not just fall apart because of it and feel terrible because of it, because a lot of people would chase that very thing, and you've achieved it. So it's nice to have that arrow in your quiver, but I I'm almost 100% sure that it's not a more efficient way to ride.
And Dan, you can test this is when you go to the climb for the 90 minutes riding before, do it all out of the saddle for 90 minutes and then see how well you do then climbing after that rather than just a 10-minute section. Because if it was more efficient, that 90 minutes should feel better than sitting.
Yep.
Right? You should feel better at the end.
Yeah.
Theoretically, yeah.
I mean, and we're comparing flat with climbing, where you're in a slightly modified body position.
Right, but
I don't
still,
think the little 10% change is going to do it.
Here's another here's an assumption that I have on this is that, and this is pretty obvious, but you've become detrained as a cyclist over that period of time, right? And as a result, and I feel this every time, like when I take like 2 weeks off the bike and I come back, it's hard. Like it doesn't feel good, right? Even when you're in, especially like just sitting down, getting used to the saddle again. I mean, you were mentioning that this year because you had a long layoff because of house stuff and everything else. And Chad was going through Chad was going through saddles here at the office. He was going through saddles like every week. There was a new saddle.
I finally fell into that rut. It's got to be the saddle
and chamois cream.
Yeah. So and like and our minds were like, no, it's the saddle. No, I'm fine. It's the saddle. Or in this case, it's like, it's the position, but it's just the fact that like it definitely, when we aren't doing something for a while and then we expect to come back, and when it feels different, you should expect it to feel different. You shouldn't expect it to feel normal. Yeah. And it'll take time to get to the point where it starts to feel normal again. On the standing part, though, the pure standing side of things, so I've noticed that like the best athletes in almost every case, I know that there are contadors out there that are outliers that stand and perform incredibly well. But watch the best athletes, and they are riders that favor sitting down, absolutely. And you'll even see it like look at Peter Sagan as a great example. Like when there are accelerations on climbs or anything else, he is not quick to get out of the saddle. He's actually quick to stay in the saddle and then just to spin up. And I think that it's because they have efficiency in mind. There's one thing between what feels good or feels easy, and usually that's short-lived. It's off of perception, versus what we know on the pragmatic approach, what is more efficient. And man, I've noticed, so like I think all of us when we first started out cycling, we probably all were more quick to stand when we had to respond to something or accelerate. And with time, we've learned the value. There's like kind of the tactical value of sitting down and not signaling to everybody that you're going hard, but also just the efficiency value of staying in the saddle to match accelerations or when the road tips upward. It's real, and it's there for sure. And
if you don't have a power meter, you're run out of gears, you stand up, your cadence goes from 90 to 60. And you're like, oh, it's so much easier standing. But really, you're putting out less power. Your cadence is less for the same speed. You're actually going to go slower. So you're like, oh, standing's so much easier. Yeah, and also another big thing I see is that people, a lot of the time when they get out of the saddle, they don't stand out of the saddle usually for a really long time. So they glance down at their power meter after 1 second out of the saddle. And what happens is your power meter goes, oh, wow. So basically, it's averaging your speed and your torque. So it thinks that it doesn't have a lot of time to catch up to the increase or to the decrease in speed, but it does read this spike in force really quick. So when you get out of the saddle, a lot of the time, that's why you'll see like the power jumps really high. Yeah. Check it out 10 seconds after. And a lot of the time, your power is actually lower out of the saddle.
It happens on the trainer, too. And you can look at the power files, and you can see those very characteristic ticks. You can see when I get out of the saddle. You can see when I sit down. You can see when it's all the same little... What is that, like a sine wave sort of?
Yeah. You can even do this. You can trick your power meter for a second by basically like dropping to your little ring really fast, and suddenly you were doing a lot of force. Then you drop to your little ring, and it's like, bang, like you go to 140 RPM. For a brief second, it'll be like, wow, that's a lot of watts. And then it figures it out because it's always averaging it out. So looking at it just in the moment might be a little tricky. If you look at it a little later on, when you're out on the road or on the trainer and you're riding, check this out and you'll see. It's kind of interesting to see. I always think that I'm putting out big power, and I'm saying this in quotes when I get out of the saddle, but many times it's just for a second, and then it's less power. And then I sit back down, and then it actually starts to kind of stabilize and tick up again. So,
but it is worth noting that if he if he's holding 330 watts seated and he stands and holds 330 watts and returns seated and the RPE doesn't change, that does mean he's good at it. But again, I assure you the efficiency is not the same.
Right. Now, one thing that I see a lot of people say is like, and like you just said, Chad, like it's also like you can be good at it and it might be good to be good at it, right? Because you might want to be able to utilize it in certain sections because you can certainly exert more torque in a short bit of time when you put yourself into a standing position versus a seated position.
Put a different stress on the muscles that have been doing the same repetitious movement over and over again.
Sure.
That's a huge relief.
The one thing though that like Nate, you've pointed this out before, but like a lot of people say, oh, it's like when you stand, you can do more because you're putting your body weight into each pedal stroke.
You're using gravity to help.
I had the hardest time with that one, but I've seen the light.
Yeah.
I'm not the physics guy.
Yeah.
So I got physiology down, but man, physics, whew.
Yes,
Different deal.
But no. So
Yeah.
I'm going to describe this.
Yeah.
Because I will get hate mail.
Yeah. Let's
and
go into
the
forum.trainerroad.com
Don't touch
on this
the
one.
forum on this one. You'll get lost.
No. It'll be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I like to think about this first. We're going to talk about it as potential energy. So you have a hill, you got a rock. You push that rock up the hill. Now, when the rock's at the top of the hill, it has potential energy, meaning that it's got energy stored, and with gravity's help, it rolls back down. That energy is released. So you put energy into it by pushing this rock up the hill, right? So you have it go down, and let's say you do this 20 times in a row, and you go, gravity's doing all the work. Like, yes, gravity's doing the work, but you had to.
It took work to get it back up.
Exactly. Yeah, it took work to put it back up. And if you didn't have friction and air density and all this sort of stuff, it would be like a system where there would be no energy lost at all.
Right.
Because if you could just put it up and then it would come back down with gravity. Now, when you're on a bike, people are like, you're using gravity to turn the pedals.
Like throwing your weight down.
Exactly.
Kind of. Yeah.
So the best way to think of this is you're on the trainer. Your elevation is not changing, right? You're in a fixed point. And to get one side down, to get the other side down, you have to then push that rock to the top of the hill again for it to come down. If gravity helped the whole time and you're in the same position, you would have a perpetual motion machine.
You would be very fast.
You would break the laws of physics, and you would be a trillionaire because all energy needs. We would go through space and colonize everywhere.
Yes.
But where I get lost every time is because you're moving around a fixed axis. How does that not affect that whole dynamic?
Because the fact is that it takes energy still to move your body. If you look at it, it's not as if your body is moving to a new place every time.
You're putting the rock
cost.
back on top of the hill each time with your pedals. You have to be picking yourself back up.
Yes.
Now, if you were going with each pedal stroke, the bottom bracket was going down that same amount.
Yes.
Then you would be like your potential energy would all be going back out, and you wouldn't actually have to pick yourself back up. So that's called going downhill.
And that's also or going to the core of the earth if you're on the trainer.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it works. So you are using gravity to push the pedal, but you have to pick yourself back up to do it again and do it again.
We're not physically talking about lifting your pedal back up. We're talking about the weight that you threw down.
Exactly.
It's not like you're continually throwing it down. It has to go back into the same spot.
And when you're climbing, you're actually picking yourself up higher each time, right? Like, and this is why it takes more work to go up the hill to go higher because you're fighting gravity with your mass.
Yeah.
So hopefully that explains it.
Science.
I hate physics.
Go into forum.trainer.com if you think that
Let's try some diagrams in there.
No, I mean there's.
No, I want people to. It'll be fun. It'll be cool to see. Like, yeah.
Potential energy is cool. Like this cup has potential energy, and if I were to push it off, the energy would go away.
I find it fascinating.
Like it would, you'd lose some potential energy because it goes lower.
Physics is incredible. Ivor, I'm not sure how you say the name, I apologize, says, it seems pretty clear that I'm overtrained. I've got many of the symptoms that I see listed everywhere for overtraining syndrome and mentioned in the podcast. For background, I haven't taken a week off in 2 years. I've ridden over 1,000 miles per month for the last 18 months, 13,000 miles last year, and 10,000 miles so far this year. I commute by bike. Additionally, I started racing last year. I'm 39, male, and at my peak, I was 165 pounds with an FTP of 368. That's impressive. That's a fast person. I moved in May, and my commute went from 60 miles round trip to 90. Over time, unsurprisingly, my resting heart rate started to climb from the high 30s to around 50, and my HRV plummeted and is about 1/4 of what it was. We talked about that a couple of weeks ago. I don't know. It is kind of funny. I was just talking to a Kona athlete who feels like they have everything nailed in terms of like the recovery side of things. And I was like, were you measuring that with HRV? They're like, as soon as I did that, everything broke. So I stopped. But anyways, I should have realized what was going on when I took a ramp test and got 300 watts. So clearly I need to take time off, he says. How much time makes sense? And what should the time off look like? Can I lift or run, etc.? Thanks from Ivor. So maybe we should step back, right?
Yeah. So if you really have overtraining syndrome, don't be asking us. Go to a doctor. It's super serious. It can take a year to get back. Like longer. This is serious business. Next question.
Yeah.
Just kidding. But let's talk about it in general without giving this guy other advice other than go see a doctor.
Yeah. So, pardon me. This is going to come down to just how deep a hole you've dug. Sorry to run that metaphor into the ground. We use it a lot, but that's the case here. So how far gone are you? We've talked about functional overreaching can branch into non-functional overreaching, can branch into overtraining, and it's tidy and it's a nice way to quantify it. I've of late stumbled onto Phil Maffetone's, I think, better description of overtraining because he breaks it down into 3 levels of overtraining. The first level, second level, third level being the worst, the third level being a little more analogous to what most people call overtraining syndrome, the whole syndrome of effects. I took a screenshot and sent it to Tucker, so we'll definitely post it on the forum, but it's a very concise description of what the signs of each of these stages are, what the comeback from each of these stages requires, and it kind of breaks down to, if you're a little bit overtrained, count on a couple few days to come back, maybe a couple few weeks. A little more overtrained, those few weeks can grow into months, and then full-blown OTS, overtraining syndrome, stage 3 in his case, you're looking at months to years, and multiple years potentially. So it's a big deal. Not too many people get it. Not too many people reach it. We've talked about that before too, because you have to be a high-level athlete to push yourself to that, or at least a highly committed athlete to push yourself to that level or that depth. And you may have, because we're looking at your numbers, that's a lot of bike riding.
It's a lot of time.
But the 300 watts is... So
he's still putting up quite a lot of power. So and it is, as a percentage of what he was doing, it's what we're talking about, not even a 20% decrease, 15% decrease. So I don't think you're that far gone, but I do think you're at a point where you need to take this seriously and take a look at that chart. I don't want to break it down again because we've covered this so many times, but look at that chart and see how many of these symptoms align with how you're feeling. And as far as the comeback, who can say? You're going to have to dabble with it. And then what you do in the meantime, you ask if you can strength train or lift or run. Probably not. I mean, if your body's simply overwhelmed, it's not just your cycling legs are overwhelmed, it's your body. It's systemic.
You can't compartmentalize it like that.
No,
your body doesn't know.
Not if it's legitimate fatigue. I mean,
Ivor, talk to your doctor. But what I've seen for true overtraining syndrome, people talk about not being able to walk up a flight of stairs.
Yeah.
It's not a 300 watt FTP for an hour.
Right.
But still, maybe if you aren't, maybe you're very close to it. Like maybe this is the beginning of it and people push through it.
Maybe you're on the tipping point.
Yeah.
And continuing doing what you're doing right now could push you over it. And next thing you know, you've saddled yourself with several months of recovery.
I think no matter what, the safe one is to rest. Like that's a safe recommendation for us right now is rest and go talk to a doctor.
So somewhat unrelated to Ivor's question, but something I see that's commonly kind of drawn in on this topic is a lot of people just associate like big volume bump and overtraining, and they kind of like almost assume like a causation with that, right? And I struggle with that when a lot of people just basically just tie them in kind of inherently together. Fact is, certain people can maintain volume that is incredibly high, and other people cannot.
Ivor's probably one of these people. I mean, considering what he's been doing and for how long he's been doing it, he does have a tremendous work capacity.
Sure,
but he's obviously pushed beyond it, and it may just be a subtle reset. He may not need a whole lot of time off. Yeah.
So like it's less, and like you said, his tremendous work capacity may allow him to sustain a really high volume. However, maybe it's just been the growth rate was too fast. It's been sustained for too long. Any other number of reasons, inadequate recovery. There's so many other things that go into getting you to a point of overtraining than just volume.
It's
right?
safe to say he's achieved some level of overtraining, though.
Sure.
So it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, man, broken record, but talk to a doctor. Quick little plug for some YouTube content. If you listen to the podcast, you should join us on YouTube. It's usually Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, like it is right now. Next week is going to be a very different schedule because we'll be in Kona. We're going to get into that really soon. And we'll be doing almost a podcast every day with athletes that have qualified for Kona. Cyclists, if you're listening to this, get off your high horse right now. These athletes are amazing. And if we listen to them, we can learn a ton. So just because they do 3 sports and they're better than you at that, I'm saying this because this is how I feel inside. Just because they're good at 3 sports and we're only good at 1 doesn't mean that we shouldn't listen to them. It means we should listen.
Go to Kona and you'll see a ton of athletes who are better than you are.
To that, like their watts per kg are
amazing.
And then we can look at, we have a post on the forum about how TrainerRoad users watts per kg, and I think the listeners to this podcast are probably very similar.
Yeah.
They are in the top percentage of cyclists, not much triathletes, because it's a world championship. So
and they can still do a sub 3 hour marathon.
Some of them.
It's amazing. Yeah. So anyways, we're going to learn a ton from different athletes. And thank you for everybody that submitted, that showed interest in coming onto the podcast. There were a ton of you. We're still going through a bunch of interviews with you guys, and stay tuned for that. But you can join us on YouTube for these ones. And then all of those ones, we're also going to have a camera on, so you'll be able to see the person that's on the podcast, which will be nice. But you can tune into our YouTube channel and subscribe, because if you do that, you get daily clips. Producer Tucker ends up cutting up a portion of the podcast or putting up a race analysis video every single day. There's one that goes up, which is pretty awesome. Some recent ones that we actually did a video that was pretty fun with you, Pete, and I. It was a crit. Forgive me. And we kind of had like a 1, 2, 3 attack approach that we took throughout the race. And you made it stick. Spoiler alert, Nate. But it's pretty interesting to see how it all unfolds. And then there's still some suspense toward the end. So check that one out. Really good learnings. There's also full races. So if you go into our YouTube channel, we have a playlist for the race analysis stuff, for the quick clips that he puts up, but also for full races. And people like to watch those when they're on the trainer. So it's just something to have. And you'll get to see first-person view of Pete or Nate or myself, something like that. And then we've done other stuff too, like the Richie Rude series. People are loving that from all the race analysis we did there. And then we have an Omnium that we did earlier this year, and it's going to be going up, which is pretty cool. So you'll get to like follow along through the stage race, so to speak, in between, or the Omnium between that. So we're going to get into Jim's question. It's about cooldowns. I'm going to call cool down. We talked about that last time with Amber. So
warming down.
Gosh. Yeah. Cringe. So Jim says,
cooling up.
Now to my question. So he says, my question, why do warm downs after the workout always taper down to nothing and not stay at the recovery wattage between intervals? I know Coach Chad has a reason for everything he does.
Usually.
All things, a very intentional man. But I can't figure this one out, and I don't know why it would be necessary. Am I missing out by ignoring this not cooling down?
Yeah, I said usually just now because in this case, there's no specific reason. I could have just left it at 40%, but I put it at 40 to 30% just because I want to make it very clear that this is the time to wind down. Mm-hmm. It's no more scientific than that. In fact, it's not scientific at all. Mm-hmm. It could just stay at 40% and you probably achieve the same end game, which let's talk about what we're after when we cool down.
Cool. I'm all for it.
Okay.
Thanks for
or cool up.
Gosh.
Just saying.
Cool up and warm down. I'm going to say it all the time.
You're trying to bring your cooling up. You're trying to bring your warming up.
That boys sense. Cooled up yet?
Oh, man.
You're not trying to bring your cooling up.
All week at Kona.
For those that don't know, it just drives me nuts. I don't understand it.
Never mind.
Okay, so let's talk the purported benefits of warming down.
Thanks, Chad. He wrote that down in quotes, too, for those that don't know on the doc.
So what everyone says we're after is a return to the pre-exercise state. We want to go back to where we started. Mm-hmm. And it basically revolves around parasympathetic activation. So if we go back to the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic ramps us up, parasympathetic winds us back down. It's the rest and digest phase. And that's all we're trying to achieve. So the claims, which I'm going to refer to as the bro science and the no science, say that
that's good.
It's intensity dependent. So if you did a really hard workout, say you were a lead out train, or you raced a criterium and contested it all the way to the final laps and then sprinted for the podium, then you're in a highly wound up state. So you're going to need a longer cool down than someone who just rolled the last 10 miles of a century.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then the format of the race is dependent too. So if it's a stage race and you feel like you're setting yourself up, or the argument is that you're setting yourself up for the next stage by doing a cool down now. You're not just cutting off the workout and carrying all the metabolic byproducts and all the things I'll get to in just a second. Then that matters more than if it's a one-off sort of event.
Yeah, makes sense.
Or workout, for that matter. If you're doing back-to-back workouts, same idea. So the claims are that there's higher blood flow because it's an active versus a passive recovery, and that stands up. That there's a removal or a more rapid removal of metabolic byproducts, and that stands up too. I'm not sure what the objective is. Just because your blood clears the lactate a little faster, I'm not sure why that's beneficial. That there's a reduction in your blood pH. I'm guessing that has to do with clearing the hydrogen a little more rapidly. I can kind of see where that would make sense to do it a little sooner than later. Blood redistribution, so rather than have it pool in the legs, you're circulating it through the body, so you don't get that low blood pressure or hypotension. You don't get that orthostatic hypotension, where if you were to stop and sit down, then you stand up and you kind of gray out. That kind of makes sense. The thing is, all these things happen anyway. They just happen over a slower time course. And the argument against that is, well, if I can make it happen quicker, then I can get to the adaptation and the recovery a little bit quicker.
So what's the actual science behind it all?
The only thing I could find, and it's a review, which says there's a fair amount more information out there. I didn't dig into all the studies in the review, but that's what reviews are for, to save you from that effort. It does, in fact, accelerate the removal of lactate from the blood, but not from the muscle. So again, what's the point? It may partially prevent an immune system depression. So that's absolutely desirable. In that it leaves you, less susceptible to illness over, a shorter period of time, or maybe it doesn't even put you in that state. But again, that's going to be intensity dependent.
Yeah.
Here's what it doesn't do, according to this review by Van Hoer. It's 2018 review, and if you're not familiar, a review is just a collection of all the studies on a similar topic or the same topic.
Yep.
It does not prevent injuries. It does not attenuate long-term adaptive response, so it doesn't diminish the training response. That's good. It does not significantly reduce muscle soreness. It does not reduce indirect markers of muscle damage, does not reduce contractile proteins, does not reduce musculotendinous stiffness or range of motion. It does not reduce systemic hormonal concentrations, so all those byproducts we're talking about. It doesn't. A lot of evidence to support that it does, at least not in the muscle. And it does not reduce measures of improve measures of psychological recovery. So all the things that are claimed, this review kind of shot them all down, and it can interfere with glycogen replenishment. I mean, consider that rather than, which isn't to say you can't take your. Well, I think they're assuming that you're cooling down rather than taking in fluids, but you can do both. So there's the argument against that.
I've always wondered, I do rides up Geiger, and then my descent's 20 minutes, and then I have to go back, and we know we don't have to have in that window. You can replenish glycogen over the course of the day.
Just how rapidly you replenish them.
Back in, I was like, I'm going to take a protein shake to the top, or like a recovery shake to the top of the mountain, so I can drink it right away and then descend.
Yeah.
Which, you just fill those stores up more quickly. So there's no harm in that.
Right.
You are kind of blunting a potential for that starved response that we get by remaining fasted. But anyway, all that aside, I still see it as a mental separation from the stress you just underwent, whether it was a race or a workout. It's a little time to decompress. It's almost meditative. And it just like if you wind yourself up by doing a bunch of tasks, then jump into bed and expect to fall asleep, it doesn't quite happen. Same way with doing a really hard workout and then just jumping off the bike and expecting your system to just automatically calm back down. You kind of facilitate that whole calming process, at least psychologically. And whether or not there's science to back it up, I've done it and it works for me.
Yeah.
And it's a great time for race analysis. I mean, if you did just do a race, there's a lot of time to sit there and contemplate with very few distractions while that whatever just happened is very fresh in your mind.
I have my clearest thoughts, I feel like, when I'm riding a bike.
So do I.
That's
depending on intensity.
Problem sorting always happens best when I'm on a bike, especially on the trainer.
Brain perfusion, man. It's a lot of blood.
Yeah, especially on the trainer, I'm able to really just sort things through. And I don't know if that's just because my whole body's busy, and as a result, I can just focus the mind. Who knows?
Every day now. I start my day with an hour on the trainer, and often enough end my day with an hour on the trainer. Butter rides. And
I'm telling you, he's going to be dropping us in Kona.
All I do is read.
Secret training over here.
Because I'm the most for lack of a better description, absorptive at that time. I retain so much more of what I'm reading when I'm pedaling the bike at, we're only talking like 50, 60% of threshold. So it's an easy ride. Yeah. But man, does my brain just heat it up.
Nate's eyes are
Look at my career, Nate. I'm surprised you haven't been poaching or stalking me.
Yeah. Double days and no fried food at all.
Coach Chad is back.
Back. So, I just did 3x, what were they, 20s or 3x18? No, 5x18s. 4x18s.
At that threshold?
Yeah, 4x18s.
Well, what wattage?
God, no, sweet spot. Just say sweet spot. It's a percentage, dude.
Okay, I think I'm going to be fine.
You'll be fine.
So, what's your weight?
I don't know, like 184, 185.
Oh, you're lighter than me.
Yeah. So one thing I would just want to recap on this is I feel like this is something that I never do. I never cool down. I never warm down, whatever you want to call this.
You probably do in TrainerRoad workouts because you finished the...
No, yeah, absolutely with that. But I mean, like post-race, I'm thinking like it's very rare that I do it. Down. Like even like spinning around a lot of the time, I find that I don't. And I've found such huge help in watching the race analysis videos that we've done with your racing this year, Nate, and being more critical of my performances. I feel like it's really helpful. And this is kind of a goal that I have of throughout this year is to actually force myself to do this so then I can process the race freshly with kind of a fair perspective, and hopefully get some benefit from it. So
Van, how do you say the name? Van what?
Hoare, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
That review, because I know people are going to say, but Team Sky does it. Right. Or
and they do. And I have to believe they have their reasons. So maybe there's more emergent science that I don't know about.
Also,
research.
Can we ever think of something a pro team has done where...
Where are we going with this?
Things jump to mind.
In the future, not cheating, but in the future, people go, whoa, that wasn't the smartest thing, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And then we all do it because a pro team did it. And then
Totally.
Air pressures and tires, they used to be like 150, like just...
Basically, like until like last year, they were still at like 150.
No, they're still doing it. There's some people who are still tied to tubulars pumped up to 170.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, and totally. What I'm saying
just
too.
Just because they do it doesn't mean you should.
And just because this review doesn't mean it's science is always changing and evolving too. We're always like know different stuff. And just because we don't have the evidence doesn't mean that something's not true.
Correct.
It's like, especially in all things, this is what's really tough too. In exercise physiology, we're hoping for 0.5% or 1% increase. And usually on these studies, they don't have enough. The magnitude of the effect on something isn't large enough for a small sample size.
Right.
So it's
tough to figure
it's really tough, yeah. And they have that like magnitude and based inference way to do statistics on it, which is not good. But anyways, science is tough, especially exercise physiology science, because we want that little small increase all the time.
100%.
Yeah, the absence of evidence does not mean the evidence. Oh God, just screwed it up. The absence of evidence does not mean the evidence of absence.
Yeah,
it's not the same idea. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. There might be benefit to this.
True story. Okay, last bit of info. Then we're going to go into just a handful of live questions that you've submitted on YouTube.
Are we going to talk about Kona?
Yes, that's what we're going to do right now.
Oh,
yeah. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Sounds good. So last bit of info on this. So first of all, we're going to be in Kona Monday through the whole Kona week. So we would love to see you there if you are going, whether you're an athlete, whether you're just a fan, whether you're a support crew, whatever it is. We'd love to see all of you. We've had a blast riding with folks as well, whether it's like had a number of situations where like there was a husband there who was supporting his wife, so he would ride with us in the mornings, that sort of thing. And we're going to be riding every morning at 7 a.m. from Lava Java on Ali'i Drive. So that's like a really popular spot. It's just I think it's just like a mile from the race start.
Probably we'll be actually at Kona Haven, which is right next to it.
Forgive me. Yeah, Kona Haven. Yes.
And right. You can get banana bread to put in your pockets and iced coffee to put in your bottles.
So good.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we'll be there at 7 a.m. or leaving at 7 a.m. basically in the mornings for a ride. Most mornings we're going to be riding on going down to Captain Cook and doing some sort of variation down there. It's a ton of fun. If anybody hasn't ridden that, it's a blast. And then as of now, we think that we're actually going to ride Koloko Drive on Monday just because of weather.
Kidding? The day we show up?
I know.
That's the best day because you're going to have... Your blood's going to be great, and you're not going to be tired from the week.
So
it's
we're
the best
thinking,
and it's not raining.
The main reason we're thinking we're going to do is because it's not raining. And for those that don't know, Koloko Drive is, it's It's the hardest climb I've done.
I walked part of it.
I've never
That's
done
how-
a harder climb. It's really cool. I think that you climb 5,000 feet. Is that right?
I think 4,500 or
From
something.
from the water, basically.
Oh, from
up.
the water? Yeah, I think so.
It's like, and it basically averages. I think that it averages somewhere around like it's somewhere like 18%, something like that.
No,
It's,
it doesn't
yeah.
average 18.
Yeah, the actual climb, not from the water, but the climb portion. It's so steep.
Oh.
Yeah, the turns
gearing
are
did you
20
use?
or 30 plus.
I had
Will you
the
use?
so I had the mid compact last year with a 32 in the back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
This year I have a mid compact with a 30 in the back.
What's
I
on
tried
our-
to get compact rings, but they're not in stock.
What's on our Venges?
You have a mid compact with a 32 in the back.
I know
That's
what I have in
what
the
I have.
back. I just didn't know what's in the front.
52,
So I already have
52
mid-compact.
36
Yeah.
is what we have.
You should be fine. I went out way too hard.
You're
I thought it was a 10-minute climb.
I'm just looking to survive it. I'm not
You're
gonna,
totally
I'm not gonna-
right on the grade. It's going to be lower because remember, like it would tip down in between. So yeah, I'm sure the grade's all off. But the turns are covered kind of like it's like you're in the jungle, so it's kind of like mossy and slippery in the turns, and
Like
it's
coming
they're
back from
like
Captain
twen-
Cook.
much
More
more
so,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's like 20 or 30% in the middle of a turn when you're doing that. So I couldn't get out of the saddle in the turns.
But it's a great time.
Well, that's
everyone.
good, and we'll get it out of the way. It won't be looming the whole trip.
Yeah, and it's the cool thing is like it's definitely kind of like a badge of honor sort of thing to have climbed it. It's a cool thing to do. Sebastian Keenley
Whether on
still,
your bike or not.
according to everything I know, he does it every year. We saw him last year
On Wednesdays?
on Wednesdays. So that's why if weather permits, we'll do it Wednesday, but we'll see. But it's pretty cool that he's still. I don't know if that helps him perform, but in his mind, it absolutely does. He climbs up that thing every time. So it's a really cool climb. But otherwise, we'd love to have you join us for those rides. And then also stay tuned to forum.trainerroad.com because we'll have details on hopefully a time where we can all just meet up and some appetizers, drinks, that sort of stuff. And hopefully at a reasonable hour for athletes to come to.
Is there a Kona thread on the forum?
There will be today.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
2, you should know that Chad, I, and Pete aren't the best climbers at the moment. But we are bringing
ever.
Jonathan and Brandon. So if you feel like you want, because everyone loves to show us how strong they are,
Yeah.
you can show Brandon and Jonathan how strong you are. And
Sure.
Brandon drops you, Jonathan.
Oh,
so,
yes, like a bad habit.
But you drop me like a bad habit. I think that probably the fitness difference is the same between us
Probably.
two.
Yeah. It'll be a blast, though.
But
tons
all
of fun.
I'm sorry. You don't have to be super fast too.
All ability levels. are
Exactly.
welcome. We recollect.
Chad, Pete, and I are not going to be jamming it, and there's many recollection points. But also, I think, especially coming out of Captain Cook, a 20-minute climb. If you want to push it, you can. Then we meet at the top.
And there's even like
cruise back.
longer options where you can take more, and we'll meet up at different points. It's a blast. so.
Basically, we're going to stay together with very few. Let's see how strong you are sections.
Yep, absolutely. So it's an exciting week. Man, I know CrossFit says the fittest on earth, whatever else, but I feel like these are like the fittest people on earth, and it's pretty cool to see these people do their thing. So
That's.
I'm excited. So.
I'm going to record that and put it on the CrossFit forum.
Yeah, I'll get some hate. Anyways, if you're a cyclist, tune into Kona. Check out everything else. Check out the podcast we're going to be doing. It's awesome. These athletes are incredible. Let's go into some live questions that we've been getting from YouTube from the folks over there. Lots of people joining us today, so thank you for doing that. Let's see. Okay, somebody says, just joined in, but how does sleep affect overtraining? As a busy college kid, I often struggle to get enough sleep, and is this adversely affecting my training? The answer, I mean, is yes, absolutely.
Resoundingly, yes.
The hard thing
if
is-
there's one thing you could change, it would be to sleep more. I would even say if it comes at the expense of your training, do it. Because there are far-reaching impacts, well beyond performance, that sleep affects.
It's funny because when we're younger, we can kind of, we tell ourselves we can get away with it, even though we're probably not.
You're setting the stage for some bad stuff.
But we do, especially the college lifestyle and everything else, we definitely push through that. And once you get older, it's tough because then it starts to
That's when
really
everything starts catching up with you.
Get
That's
some
when
teeth.
the abuse you've exerted on your system starts to manifest.
yeah.
Tego 445 PS4 asks.
That's quite the name.
You guys have talked about training in heat for benefits. What about winter cold? Being outside in the winter, any benefits?
Not so much. Dr. Anna Friedlander, maybe it's Ann. I think it's Ann. I'm just going to go with Anna. Presented last 2018 at the USAC conference, and she discussed all various different challenges. Heat being one of them, hydration I think was another one of them, and cold was the one she didn't get to. And she said, "I'm not worried. I put it at the end in case we didn't get to it because there's really no benefit to it." So
Interesting.
The only thing I could think of would be grit.
Yeah.
Where you think of like,
Sure.
I ride in the cold race. You're like, I do this all the time. No big deal.
No, that's absolutely accurate. I mean, in terms of the psychological benefit from it, pretty vast. I mean, they have watch the one-day classics, and you'll hear athletes referred to as hard men. They're the guys who, when they see those conditions, they excel. I mean, they start licking their chops because they know half the field just checked out.
Yeah. A bit of a theoretical question for us from Charlie. What would be the greatest limiter to getting to a 400 watt FTP, genetics or training? And before we go into this, I want to share a story that's might not be true. Pete will be able to tell us, but it's a story about Pete. And it's kind of like Pete didn't live here for a while. He was like racing pro everywhere else. But kind of a myth about Pete was that when he first started training, like with you actually at the indoor studios, he just like would always set his FTP to 400.
It's not a myth.
He just tried to hold it
Not even that.
until he couldn't, and then he just would keep trying that.
He wouldn't even set it at 400, and he would just hit 400 watts and try to hold it for as long as he could. Yes, I was there.
That's not a myth.
That's great.
That happened.
Yeah,
And it didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. Imagine that. That was strange. But anyways, so I guess theoretically, in your opinion, 400 watt FTP, genetics or training?
It's got to be a combination of the two. It's always a combination of the two. So, I mean, you can't have a on the genetic side. If you're a 130-pound person, you're not getting a 400 watt FTP ever.
Right.
So there's a genetic limitation. But if you're the average man, we're definitely talking about a man here because a woman getting a 400 FTP, I'm not sure that's been done. I don't know.
Genetics again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But and then training can take you quite a long ways, but there has to be a combination of the two. You can't have one without the other. It's really hard for me to put greater importance on one of those over the other.
But it is genetics.
Yeah.
It's
and that's
like
what it
you
boils
just-
down to.
You can't, even with the best training, you can't do it. It's like some people, there's a small portion of the population that I think that it's possible to get a 400 watt FTP.
Yeah.
And they're usually bigger people like me.
I just don't want to discourage people from trying and just have them assume that genetically they're bound, that there's no possible way of achieving
That's an
it.
important thing to, because it can totally block you.
What I've said, I think that, and I may data back this up, but I think,
And
most
we've
of the
just regressed 100 episodes.
most of the population, and especially the population listening to this podcast, because you are self-selecting, can get to 4 watts per kilo. I think that is that's a solid thing, and that's where I think people should try to aspire to, rather than a 400 watt FTP.
It's probably a better way to quantify it too.
Yeah, watts per kilo.
Maybe say, what limits me, genetics or training, to getting 5 watts a kilogram.
Yep.
Right.
And 5 watts, it's a little tougher.
That's when it starts to teeter a little more toward genetics, I'd have to say.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And like Mr. Annoying over here, because
funny to
you're
me.
off the couch, he's 4 watts per kilo. And
Yeah.
how many people they train for years never hit it?
Yeah.
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 Sorry.
Genetics are in play for
Yep.
sure. Yeah.
So 5's in reach for you.
Oh yeah. Been there. So
I know.
Yeah. Blaze says, crashed on the velodrome Wednesday before last. Should I wait till, that's scary. Should I wait till I'm fully recovered before getting back on the bike, or can I start back early with light work? So Blaze, it totally depends on what's happened to you from the crash, obviously.
Yeah. He's in traction.
Yeah. He's got
say
part
wait.
of the velodrome still stuck in his leg. Yeah, exactly. Man, like, so the two parts of you that need to recover, it's not just the physical side, it's the psychological side. If you go back and listen to the first podcast episode with Amber Pierce, and I can't remember the number right now, she talked about how she came back from crashes, and we had a good, really productive conversation on that. And I think that so just because I don't know what physically has happened to you, on the psychological side, I don't find personally a lot of value in rushing back to it. Sure, confronting, like mentally confronting what perhaps caused the crash and isolating that. But I've never found that just simply rushing back into it is the best cause, psychologically speaking. Physically speaking, talk to your doctor. Sorry for the cop-out, but that's basically the best way to do it.
So for me, when I broke my collarbone, I was back in the trainer like 3 days later, something like that. And my doctor said that was fine for me with my concussion and my broken collarbone, but I was not putting weight on my arm or anything like that. But again, it just matters how you crashed.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
If you like skinned your knee, most likely you're probably okay to get back in that ride.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how many times do you see people someone crash and get back in the race, right?
Oh, yeah. Happens all the time.
All the time.
Yep. Okay, let's see. Rolling through. By the way, it's awesome because so many people are asking questions, and then the other people that are joining us for the live stream, they're answering them, and they're answering them very
That's
well.
the beauty of the forum.
Which is fantastic, right? Yeah.
We had one person say he's very offended. He's a software engineer.
Oh no, you look great. You're beautiful. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're just gonna do one more. Okay, so this is an interesting one that we see a lot of people, and I think it's based on a misconception. Nate, you'll get fired up with this one.
Did you read it?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
It's a surprise.
So this guy's Trevor says, why is my indoor FTP so low? He says, I can do my interval work at 275 outside and only 255 indoor with the same workout. Drives me nuts. And I mentally feel so weak. So this is something that like we see and we hear from a lot of people.
Cooling is the first one. Make sure you have adequate cooling, and your fan is probably not going to be adequate. Go on the forum too. There's the Lasco floor fans. Those things are next level. I use 2 of those.
So do I.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm going to look up the name while you're talking here because people are going to ask for the
Lasco
specific
performance
one.
fan. Yeah, and Tucker will put it in the show notes. He just gives thumbs
There's
up.
a couple good models.
Second one is I had a huge problem with this. Is I had a low inertia trainer for a long time. So if you have one of those trainers, especially a mag trainer, inexpensive, feels like pedaling through mud.
Chunky peanut butter.
Exactly. It can be really hard to put out the same amount of power. Chad and I use the hammer. Hammer's got a gigantic flywheel. And for me, I found that's been very helpful of getting the same amount of power out. The Wahoo Kicker also has a very big flywheel. Other than that, too, like I was just watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine during a warm-up. So hard. Then I put on like up-tempo music in the interval.
Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah.
Consider your headspace.
Exactly. Can you and what you're looking at. So it seems weird, but sometimes it goes by the fastest when I'm not looking at anything. It's a dark room. All I hear is music, and I see my wattage.
That's what I prefer to do in almost every case. And when I'm training, I've found that I can improve my performance the best that way. You know,
Reading has proven to be a really productive distraction. And when the intervals get a little harder, a little challenging, when I start to get toward the last 3 or 4 minutes of an 18-minute sweet spot repeat.
That's when Chad dives into the real deep studies.
No, seriously, that's
when he starts taking notes.
that's when I
That's when he
recognize
pulls that
I'm
out.
really challenging myself on a cognitive level. And then when I ditch that and I just focus on the work, it feels 5-10% easier.
It's crazy, right?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of pieces to it. Yeah.
I have one other thing to say is, and I have a study again for this, but my personal experience was when we first started doing this, and I had that same exact experience you're talking about through actually your coaches or your classes, Chad.
Yeah.
I raised my FTP 50 watts, but then outside it also went up 50 watts. So
Right.
it's weird. Like even though I couldn't put out the same wattages indoors as outdoors, my relative difference or improvement was the same. And I've seen other people on the forum say that too. But I think really if you do the cooling, the motivation, and the flywheel,
You'll get there.
You'll get there, yeah.
It takes time. Like for me, I noticed that there was a difference in the beginning, and now there's no difference
Yeah, I don't have any
at
difference.
all.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same.
I used to have a difference, and I'd like look forward to it. And now I've kind of like baked that in. I'm like, oh shoot, there's no difference.
So for those just listening, it's the Lasco 4900 Pro Performance High Velocity Utility Fan. It's the thing that sort of like, it looks like what you would put in a basement when it floods, and it kind of like dries out a room.
You get 2 of those.
Oh yeah.
I got
Daddy.
one on the front of the bike and one on the back of the bike, and they create this little vortex on me.
Nice.
It's magical.
I was
It's
going to say
worth-
they'll just cancel each other out.
Not
Yeah.
so
It's
much.
like the center of a hurricane.
One hits the back of my body, the other hits the front of my body, and it's
Well, that's kind of
quite
a
nice.
good idea.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I might try that.
As
'Cause
long-
as long as they don't hit each other.
As long as they don't hit each other, then you're good. Because then
No,
you'll be
no,
in
no.
this like stalemate.
Just be trying to breathe the whole time.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious.
I'm going to try that.
So if you go to the forum, Tucker actually has a link in there, so it's really easy to get. So you can check it out there. But well, thanks for everybody for joining us. And once again, if you want to have more of your coaching, cycling, and triathlon related questions answered, you can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. If you want to find out more about how to become a faster cyclist and just get faster, you can go to trainerroad.com. It's a place to do it. And for all the notes on this episode 223 on forum.trainerroad.com. We'll talk to you all next week from Kona. Chat soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.